March 8th, 2022. The internet and film discourse grows more dour by the hour. People have succumbed to toxic fandoms as the studios flood the theaters with superhero movies, crippling all other films that stand in the way. Some nights, I'm discouraged, and then others, I look up and I see films from talented directors like Matt Reeves. My next mission is to look at his newest film, The Batman, with fellow truth seekers as we seek to find the answer to the question, do we really need another version of the Batman? Do we?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cinematic Schematic, the official podcast of the Cinematropolis.com, your home to thoughtful conversations on film. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and today we're diving deep into Gotham's criminal underbelly to answer the question, does the world really need another version of Batman? Specifically this one. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're reviewing The Batman. We're going to start with a quick icebreaker question before we jump into a spoiler-free review and verdict on the film, and then we'll conclude the show by going into an in-depth spoiler section where we will really dive into all the meat and potatoes of the concluding act to this film. I'm so excited to be rejoined in fighting the crime being too many superhero films. Asking the question, do we need another Batman movie? I'm rejoined, as always. You could say he's like my Lucius Fox, because he's got so many big, great ideas, and he always comes in for like a layup. He always helps me get like this, really win the game. I'm rejoined by award-winning Oklahoma filmmaker, Laron Chapman. Laron, welcome back.
I had no idea that intro was for me, so I'm very flattered. I was like, this is definitely someone else. He's definitely not talking about me. Good to be back, sir.
Listen, man, you always come in when I'm in a pinch. You just show up and like, boom, awesome podcast sauce right there. Just like Lucius Fox, right? I'm also very excited to be rejoined by my good friend, writer here at the Cinematropolis. You could say he's my Robin Boy Wonder, Daniel Bokemper. Daniel, welcome back to the Cinematic Schematic.
Let's be real. I'm fucking calendar man. There's no.
So when you're asking me for deadlines, that's what it is.
Yes, anytime there's a day, I'm aware of it. I'm aware of those days.
Daniel, what's tomorrow? What's tomorrow's date?
Oh, fuck. God damn it. I knew you'd ask that. No, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to welcome, you could call him my Nightwing, mostly because he's got really badass designs in his back pocket, the Brockness monster of graphic designers, Brock Lay. Brock, welcome back to the Cinematic Schematic.
I like to consider myself the Batsuit with nipples because no one takes me that seriously and I'm good for a few laughs.
So, ladies and gentlemen, before we get to today's review, I did want to quickly note that if you are listening to the show today and you enjoy the conversation we have here, please support the show by subscribing and leaving us a rating and review on your preferred podcast app, specifically Apple Podcasts, and most recently Spotify. Spotify does require that you listen to us talk for a little while, though, so make sure to check out and finish this episode you're listening to now, and then give us a rating. Because unfortunately, I'm not as made of money like Bruce Wayne, so it does require some moral support and a boost in ratings to get us found by more listeners just like you. Let's go ahead and move into our icebreaker discussion here, shall we? So I actually have two questions for us. The first one, I'm going to throw this out there just for fun. What is your favorite Bat gadget and why? And Daniel, across the table from me here today, I'm going to start with you. What would you pick if you get one Bat gadget?
God, I can't pick one. Can I pick two?
Sure.
Two? Sure. Okay, cool. So on a technical level, since I just watched The Dark Knight, I think the very Orwellian bat sonar that he deploys in that film, it's alluded to at the start, but then you get it back again in the final sequence with the Joker where he's climbing that skyscraper. It's like a bat sonar that bounces off of every single person's cell phone to create some kind of image through sound that's very, very cool, also very terrifying to know Batman can do that.
I mean, the movie, in fact, ponders a question Back when we actually still cared about privacy, they were like, is this an ethical thing to do? Should any one man or brand have this power?
It's like Apple's terms of service have a Batman clause in it. Like maybe used to fight crime. Who knows? Just trust it. Don't worry about it. But also the shark repellent of Adam West days, because you never know. You never know when you're going to need that shark repellent.
So here's a $1 million question about the shark repellent that I always go back to. Do you know that is in fact a mechanical shark that he uses the shark repellent on? So the question is it shark repellent or is it robot repellent? We may never know the answer to that question. Also, it explodes when it hits the water, but you know.
Because Batman.
It's also got explosive properties, you could say.
It's true. Well, I mean, explosions do deter sharks, so it's still a shark repellent.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So we've got the Apple iPhone and maybe shark repellent.
Yes.
Laron Chapman, I'm going to turn to you. What is your favorite Bat gadget and why?
I feel so basic in saying it, but like the grapple gun. I mean, any time he uses that, whether it's to shoot through someone's, limb or to attach to some, and to see him kind of propel himself to different locations. I always live for that moment. It's always what I'm waiting for. I'm waiting for him to pull that out and swing around somewhere. So, yeah.
He's not Batman until he grapple guns at some point, right? Okay. All right. Yeah, fair point. All right, Broccoli, bring us home. What is your favorite Bat gadget?
The obvious answer is the Batarang, but there's so many variations that vary with the logo for that particular Batman movie. But my actual choice would be the Bat Skates from Batman and Robin, because why in the fuck would you have skates in your boots just chilling and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, Mr. Freeze, I'm gonna ice skate with these dudes in hockey pads.
It's the hockey team from hell.
You never know when Mr. Freeze, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, will show up and want to fight you,
And they can't even stand on them, and they protrude from their boots. They have to like lay on their back, put their feet up, and then they'll come out of their boots. I don't know. It just cracks me up. So that's my favorite one, just because of how ridiculous it was.
All right. So I think that's a great selection. I'm surprised I'm picking the best Bat gadget from Batman and Robin. No, I thought about the skate boots, but no, it's not that. It is the Bat credit card, because someone's got to pay for these hosting fees for this podcast, guys. And it's going to be Batman here. Yes. Come on.
I bid $50,000 for Poison Ivy. $100,000. And I bid $500,000.
$1 million.
$2 million.
You don't have it. $3 million.
I'll borrow it from you. $4 million.
$5 million.
That's a utility belt, not a money belt. $6 million.
$7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
Expiration date, forever. That's what it was.
Listen, guys, at the end of the day, if you've got infinite money, do the rest of the gadgets matter? I mean, in all seriousness, I've got to go with the Batwing. Specifically, my preferred version is from Tim Burton's Batman, the one with Michael Keaton. I just love it. Get chills every time. The scene where you see it fly up in front of the moon and do the bat symbol. And I know it's goofy and corny, but it's the score is sweeping and it's da na na na, and it's right in front of the moon, and you're like, this is Batman. It's incredible.
Dig it.
So that's my first question. The second one that's actually probably going to give listeners a little more insight into our relationship with the Batman, the film series, or the comic book, or what have you, is who is your favorite Batman and why? I'm not going to put limitations on this. Later, we're going to rank our favorite Batman movies, and we have limited it to the theatrically released Batmans. But there's a lot of really good animated Batmans out there, too. So I'm going to leave all the Batmen on the table for us to decide. And I'm actually going to go in reverse order this time. So, Brock Lay, who is your favorite Batman and why?
This is the hardest question. I have so many biases to actors, so even if their Batman sucked, I want to pick them. George Clooney. But I think I'm going to have to go with Michael Keaton, just on the fact that was what just started this whole thing for me. It's a nostalgia factor. It just, when I was a kid, that's all I wanted, was just to be Batman, and I loved him so much. So I got to go Michael Keaton. Got to go.
I think Michael Keaton is an iconic version. I mean, like you said, the first version that you probably saw, that so many people saw. And, there are certainly worse versions of Batman to be the first big screen Batman for a generation. So I think that's a great pick. Laron Chapman, favorite Batman and why?
Well, I have to echo that. Michael Keaton, again, started all of this, but I also feel like he's my favorite of the duality of the character. Like, there's certain Batmans I like as just one half of the coin. He's my favorite as Batman and Bruce Wayne combined. So I also will go with Keaton.
All right. Guys, I got good news for you. We get to talk about Batman again this year, and one of them involves Michael Keaton. So, opportunity on the horizon. They couldn't get me excited for The Flash. They're like, but Michael Keaton Batman. Now
sells the Flash.
Now I'm sold. Daniel Bokemper, who is your favorite Batman?
I hate them all. No, I'm just kidding. I do. I agree with the rest of the table, but with the caveat, Robert Pattinson's Batman has not marinated quite long enough for me to truly rank him, but he's definitely in the running for my favorite Batman for very different reasons. But I do also have to lend it to Michael Keaton. Ultimately, I think, as Laron was saying, he's a perfect balance. Both sides of Batman, Bruce Wayne and Batman himself, are portrayed quite well and very goofy. And to an extent where I think some people could definitely be alienated or prefer, especially when you place it against Christian Bale's Batman. It's he looks like a dork. I get it, but that's the point. Like, Batman is a dork. Like, that's okay. That's something to be celebrated, and I think Michael Keaton delivers that.
What? Daniel, I'm sorry. Batman is very serious.
Yeah, he is very serious. He's the most serious.
We don't
thing.
laugh at Batman because he's for grown-ups.
Yes, he is very adult. Very serious.
Swear to me.
I'm going to break the ranking. I, too, adore Michael Keaton. And again, I am very excited to see him come back. My bias, for those of you who have not listened to my Batman, the Animated Series, Superman, the Animated Series podcast, they probably already saw this coming, but Kevin Conroy, my favorite version, I actually think he is also encapsulating both versions really, really well. He was the first actor to suggest they change the voices, so that Bruce Wayne and Batman had very different voices. There's a lot of bias there because I grew up with him, animated version, but also he's played that character consistently more than any other actor for decades. He still voices Batman. I mean, he was in the Arkham video games about a decade ago, or it's Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, Arkham Knight. He did the Justice League. So I have a lot of time with him, so I'm very biased towards that, but I've seen his voice capture the range, and because it's an animated format, he's able to go to places that the live action films haven't been able to go to quite yet. That said, there's more range because he's around longer and he's able to do more because it's animated. So therefore, I really like him. Mask of the Phantasm, which we'll get to later, is I think arguably one of the best Batman movies. I will say though, I genuinely like things about every version, even the George Clooney version. And maybe, the Val Kilmer version. I think I can get on board with certain things about him too. So, there's not been a terrible actor who's played Batman. There's only been bad movies that he happens to be in. I'm looking at you, Ben Affleck. All right. Well, listeners, now that you know a little bit more about us, let's go ahead and jump into our spoiler-free review of The Batman.
Fear is a tool. When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you. Burn the gun! This is about a king. And Riddler's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left. I don't care what happens to me.
It's only going to get worse for you.
So according to IMDb, the Batman is described as when the Riddler, a sadistic serial killer, begins murdering key political figures in Gotham, Batman is forced to investigate the city's hidden corruption and question his family's involvement. So a couple of different fun facts I wanted to note here. Firstly, Robert Pattinson stars in this film as Batman. He is the 7th actor to do this in a live action film so far. This movie, which just opened this past weekend, has grossed $134 million domestically in its opening weekend, which, if I am reading correctly, is the biggest first film in the Batman franchise. So kudos there. And also just a little bit of production history. This film actually, despite being a standalone, unconnected version of the Batman, was actually supposed to be a film starring Ben Affleck, written, directed, produced by Ben Affleck as a part of the DCEU. But in 2017, Ben Affleck stepped back, and then after the huge failure that was Justice League, Warner Brothers is basically like, guys, maybe we shouldn't put all our eggs in this basket. They brought on Matt Reeves, who is most famous for recently doing 2 of the 3 Planet of the Apes films. So that's Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. And then he also did Let Me In back in the day, which is a really great American remake of a fantastic film. And let's see. And Cloverfield. How could we forget Cloverfield? So this is a guy who has in my opinion, not only has he not made a mediocre movie, he's only made great movies from my perspective to date. Anyway, so Reeves was the one who made the call. He said, I want to start from scratch. We're doing my own Batman. And now we arrive at the Batman. So we're going to start with quick thumbs up, thumbs down, reactions, and thoughts. Laron Chapman, I'm going to start with you. What did you think of the Batman?
This gets a solid thumbs up from me. I do think it's imperfect, but I think that the things that I love about it, I really love about it. So it's excelling in the areas that check the boxes for me to go out to the multiplex and spend 3 hours watching a movie about a character that's been, molded and shaped over the years. And so I walked away with it very pleased, very pleased.
Awesome. So we got one pro. Brock Lay, what did you think of the Batman?
My thumb is at like a 45-degree angle pointing up. There were some things that I loved about the film and some things that I didn't, kind of in Laron's boat. But the more I talk about it, the more I'm kind of like, even when I talk about the negatives, it's almost like myself. I'm like, oh my God, like I liked it way more than I thought. I thought Pattinson was great. And I thought just the overall look at the film and how it was written is completely different from any other Batman we've had. So I really appreciated that aspect of it.
Awesome. And we'll get more into, Pattinson's performance specifically here in a moment. But first, Daniel Bokemper, what did you think of the Batman?
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it more than I expected to follow Laron and Brock's lead. It establishes this tone, this sort of malaise that permeates the entire film. And I think it's something I've wanted from a Batman film, but just haven't quite gotten yet with this one. And it does have plenty of callbacks, homages. There's clear inspiration, not just from other Batman films, but also films in general. In a way, it's a celebration of cinema and that, coming at it from that angle. But it still feels entirely fresh. It definitely feels like its own beast, and it's a bit of a beast. Part of me wonders if my luster and how I'm receiving it is, this is the shiny new toy. So it becomes very easy to put it a bit on a pedestal. But aside from what I consider a somewhat lackluster finale and a few other minor complaints, it's incredibly solid and definitely worth sitting in cinemas. I'm excited to revisit it probably within the next few months.
All right, so I think I will close this out here and just say that we have a consensus around the table, which is this is a great movie. It's a great Batman movie. And Daniel, to your point, I was thinking hard about this. This is probably the first DC movie I have been legitimately excited to rewatch since Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight Rises. I think it's actually better than that film. But I'm saying that's how long it's been since I've been this amped about any DC movie. And honestly, there are probably hardly any Marvel movies that I've been this excited to revisit. I say that to say, I think this film, it does have a lot to offer. It's an immaculately crafted film. The production design, the art direction, the score. This actually rivals the score from the Michael Keaton films by Danny Elfman, which I didn't think was possible, especially we're looking at Nolan's films, and you had the Hans Zimmer score, which is it was really influential and impactful, but not super hummable. And then you had the Zack Snyder Batman movies. I could hardly tell you what that score sounded like. This is an iconic, return to theme Batman score. Really, really exceptional. Brock, to your point, I think this is my favorite representation of Gotham on the big screen. it's a nice fine line between the realism we got from the Nolan films, but also like the sort of heightened noir that Batman is known for. And that way, I think this is the like most iconic version since the animated series, which, you know, again, that series was really into the Art Deco thing and was really iconic for that.
I agree, and I loved it. But there was one thing, and this spoils nothing. I could not stand the naming of Gotham Square Garden.
I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit when they did that too.
Yeah.
Other than that, they nailed it.
Yeah.
Gotham Stock Exchange were totally cool. Gotham Square.
I draw the line at Gotham
Too
Square
far.
Garden.
Too far. But I would go to any of the concerts that went there, though.
Prince hologram.
Everything about this film is really good. I do think it. We'll get into the specifics, the details. Again, cast across the board, A+. I did feel the runtime. I'm not saying I was ever bored or like, let's wrap it up. But, you know, sometimes when you're in a movie, even when you like, you still kind of like, okay, we're approaching the finale, right? And then you realize there's still like, you know, 30 minutes left. So I did think it was a little long. And yeah, Daniel, we'll get into it. But it's definitely some third act problems that I noticed. Whereas the first two acts of the film, I was like, this is a detective story unlike anything we've ever seen in any superhero film, and just a really great detective story on the likes of like Seven, you know. And then the last act, it's like some studio execs like, so I have 2 notes, and I won't say what those notes are because we haven't made it to spoilers yet, but you know, we got to have this thing and we got to have this thing. But outside of that, outstanding film overall. So let's get more into the weeds here about Pattinson's performance though. How well did this work for you? Daniel, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, and as I mentioned when we were ranking our Batmen, he may be my favorite. It's a little early to say, but I feel pretty strongly about that. I mean, he's brooding and severe, but similar to Michael Keaton, but not quite to the extent of Michael Keaton. And admittedly, there's a pretty important narrative distinction, and I'll go ahead and just say it. We don't get quite as much Bruce Wayne as we do a lot of the other
hardly any
films.
Bruce
Almost
Wayne.
No Bruce Wayne.
I'm pretty sure you can count the number of Bruce Wayne only scenes on like 2 hands, if not one hand.
It's like 6% Bruce Wayne, 94% Batman. Don't ask me how I arrived at that specific percentage, but yeah. But I think for the sake of the identity crisis, that like subdued Bruce Wayne, that little bit of Bruce Wayne we get, serves it very well. And I think Robert Pattinson was a great choice to kind of carry that story, that personal story. I cannot think of anybody who would that I know of that would serve this purpose better, but also has that distinct look, has that. I mean, with Batman, it's all kind of in the nose, honestly. Like there's a way Batman sort of just classically looks that I think he fills. And again, it's not flawless. His performance does have some issues, but it's still effective and ultimately quite moving.
All right. Yeah. So I'll keep going on the table. Laron, do you agree with Daniel? Did you feel like this is a really strong, unique take? Did Pattinson really sort of meet the challenge?
So I've been a fan of Pattinson a lot post Twilight. You know, Good Time, The Lighthouse. I mean, he's really, you know, churned in some really great, you know, compelling performances. And I think that I was actually excited for his take on this. I didn't come into this with any kind of hesitation because I do admire him as an actor. I will say I agree with the half of what Daniel said, is that basically I think that he was a great Batman, and I don't necessarily think he was a great Bruce Wayne, but I also don't know how much of that is his fault because, again, as he mentioned, it was there's not much of Bruce Wayne in the film, and so I would say that's probably one of the film's flaws. But I think that he was very effective as Batman, and he's probably, again, in contention for me too, being one of the best Batmans versus one of the best, the whole encompassing thing. So, but yeah, I think he was very effective, and it was one of those performances again that I think that I'll be excited to revisit, after this, because I find myself really thinking about this specific take on this character, and I think that with the material that as it is written, he did a very effective job. So,
no, I think that's a great note, and we're going to get more into it in spoilers about how intentional these choices were. But one thing I want to say, outside of the text of the movie, which is we see him as almost exclusively Batman, I do wonder, and Matt Reeves is attempting to make something we hadn't seen before, which is a good thing, and I think he succeeded overall. But how much of that was watching the Nolan films and saying, okay, what can I do differently? The reason I say this is because, as we'll get much more in detail in spoilers, this film presents Batman as the guy. He is, his true intrinsic self is Batman. You know, we don't really even see that. We don't even see the performance of Bruce Wayne, really. Whereas the Nolan films, Bruce Wayne is the intrinsic person, and he's trying to create this symbol and identity bigger than himself as Batman. So it's just an interesting, a fundamentally different approach that I really like, but it is interesting. I was, you know, kind of looking and saying, because I feel like the Keaton one does both, the Conroy version does both. This version seems like the opposite of what the most popular version we got, you know, about a decade ago.
Well, just the final note I'll make about that is that I think that this is one of the first times I've noticed that they've really leaned into this idea that Bruce Wayne is the facade and Batman is the true identity. And I thought that was really an interesting take. I mean, they've kind of hinted this even in The Dark Knight to some extent, you know, let Batman be the one to sacrifice all the bad press and the bad image and what have you in the cause of greater good. But here it definitely feels like he's putting on a performative act with the Bruce Wayne thing. Like, that's the thing he doesn't want to do. Batman is who he is, you know. And so I really did like that approach for sure.
Brock, what did you think of Robert Pattinson as Batman?
I thought he did good. I enjoy him as an actor. I feel like for somebody that had the success with Twilight, you know, some actors could be tied to that role forever, and that's all you see them as is, you know, Edward. But I feel like he's shed that, you know, even before this movie, but with being in this role, I think he just pushes himself further away from that. Not that it's bad to be associated with that, but I think you want to be an actor. You don't want to be associated with one role. And with this, I think he did the brooding well. And the only thing that really held him back was his hair. And it is because of Spider-Man 3 and Tobey Maguire. Yeah. Tobey Maguire rocked the goth boy emo haircut and was super broody, and it came off as very campy and shitty. Pattinson does it well, but the hair just reminds me so much of Tobey Maguire, and I'm like, God damn, you look like a fucking moron. And so it really irked me, and it was nothing that Pattinson did. It was wardrobe and the hair, and it was their choice. So I'm like, in the sequel, I really hope they just cut his fucking hair.
Just give him a nice buzz cut.
Just give him a buzz cut.
Give him a coif.
Yes.
It's fine.
See, he's year 2, so he's still trying to figure out. So again, well, we haven't mentioned this yet. This is set in year 2 of the Batman saga, and this specific version of the Batman saga. So we don't get origin story. Thank God we don't see Martha Wayne's pearls drop. I'm sorry.
I wanted a beer so bad.
I made a Laron, and for the listeners, I told everyone, I said, if Martha Wayne's pearls hit the ground, I will buy everyone a drink.
I was trying to find technicalities too. I'm like, what if you just hear like a pearl hitting the ground off screen, just in a memory?
That
like,
counts.
Yes.
No, I said you have to see it from her neck on the ground. So that didn't happen. So they just assume that we all already know about the origin story, which is smart because we've seen, like I said, 7 live action versions of Batman so far. Most of those have at least one origin story that we've seen. I mean, then after Zack Snyder's, where you literally have the slow-mo version of it, you're just like, yeah, we're good. But I say that to say he's still working the kinks out, right? So he's Batman. People know who he is. Like, they know who Batman is, but the cops still don't know. They're still like, well, we know who he is, and I guess he helps, but can we trust him?
I'm so sorry. I'm still hung up on Brock's comment. Just like imperfect Batman. Year 2. I still haven't figured out how to fit my fucking hair in this mask.
But the way you're saying that, he didn't do the regular. He didn't do the Bale Batman.
Exactly, too.
And that was a refreshing take too.
It was.
He spoke normally, and it's just like no one still knows who you are. But the only time he really did the Batman voice was in the monologues.
Yeah,
exactly. But it also helps
weird
Laron's point too, because we get that take that Batman is Bruce Wayne, not the other way around. Like that is the real persona. And I think it kind of helps serve that point pretty well.
So I have a question for you on that note, though, Brock. I was getting to my question here, which is, this is year 2, Batman. Do we think, just a general question, we all have said we like the movie, but did you guys ever get the feeling this movie was tiptoeing right up to that very fine line of self-parody with the seriousness? I hadn't thought about the Spider-Man 3 comparison, but when you pointed out, I was like, and if you didn't, that's fine. Because the movie does, like, specifically with the journals, it feels like a little
I was fine with the journals. The only eye rolls that came from me were some of the monologues. It was very tragic poetry-ish.
I am the shadows.
Yeah, and it just kind of got like, man, it's really heavy-handed and it's really hard to digest that. Like, no one really talks like that. And this is such a movie that's so grounded in reality in every other aspect that it's just like, I don't really think he would talk this poetically about this shit. He would just kind of just go about it. I don't know. That was kind of what pulled me out.
And it's not consistent either. That's the one thing. Like, they started off, I was like, is that how it's going to be? They're really leaning into the noir aspect, the narrator. But then it kind of gets derailed and it's just like, if you weren't going to commit to it, did you even need it? You know what I mean? Like, kind of thing. So, but.
Well, and then we get the one, it's a nice, well, not a nice bookend, but it's a bookend because at the end, it gives them an excuse to write the monologue where they're like, okay, guys, so if you didn't know, here's the takeaway.
Yes, and
which again, we'll get to the spoilers. But I will say the movie, despite being very bleak and arguably the darkest version of the character, does end on a very optimistic note, which is great. And I'm not going to get on rants about the Ben Affleck Batman, but I'm just so happy to see a Batman that even though you can have a really dark, brooding Batman that's also like ultimately here to bring people hope and joy and not just murder people, you know?
It was just his haircut that brought it down for me. He looked like Tobey Maguire from Spider-Man 3, but I will say, spoiler alert, I did enjoy his jazz scene better, and he was a better dancer than Tobey in that. You have to watch the movie to find out.
So if you haven't already, go see the movie to watch the secret scene. Let's talk about the rest of the cast, though. We like Robert Pattinson. We'll go around the table, Brock, starting with you. Who was your favorite member of the supporting cast outside of Pattinson? And ladies and gentlemen, we had so many great choices. We had Colin Farrell's Penguin. We had Zoe Kravitz's Catwoman. Paul Dano's Riddler. Out of nowhere, John Turturro as Falcone. I mean, there are so many good options. Brock.
You forgot one, and I'll get to him. Colin Farrell, easily the best one. You forget that it's Colin Farrell, and you don't even look at him as if like you're trying to find him anymore because he's not there. Like, you think about Johnny Depp whenever he does like a character, you're like, I still see Johnny, or you look for Johnny, and you're like, okay, I found Johnny. That was pretty easy. Colin Farrell is the most underrated actor in I don't know how long. Like Tigerland, so many movies that he's in Bruges. Like, there's so many more, and I feel like he doesn't get the respect he deserves. He was fantastic in this. Zoe Kravitz was beautiful, sexy, amazing actress. She did for Catwoman what? Michelle Pfeiffer. Anne Hathaway, fuck you. Michelle Pfeiffer did for Catwoman, which was turned me into a man. She's doing that for young boys today. But the one that you forgot was Peter Sarsgaard.
Yeah.
He pulls it full circle.
As the DA. But Maggie Gyllenhaal was in Nolan's films. They are married, so there it comes full circle. There's the connection. I enjoyed seeing Peter Sarsgaard because I always enjoy him.
Did forget about Peter.
Also, Jeffrey Wright. Jeffrey Wright.
I mean, just not as Commissioner Gordon, though. Lieutenant Gordon. Yeah.
But it's only year 2, bro.
I know. Too early.
Well, and you know what's funny about him is he is low-key. I mean, he's the heart in a lot of ways. He's the heartbeat, but he's also the comedic relief. He gets all the best jokes in the movie.
Yeah,
like it's very subtle, but like all the laugh moments back to him.
Drive. Yeah, he was really good. But
all right.
I mean, aside from the obvious ones, it was Peter for me.
Peter Sarsgaard. Okay, all right, very cool. Laron Chapman, who is your favorite supporting cast member?
Man, I mean, it's like you said. I mean, there isn't a weak supporting performance. There isn't a weak performance in the film, I don't think. But I do think that the most transformative for sure is definitely Colin Farrell as the Penguin. And much like Brock said, because you're not thinking about him being Colin Farrell. And that's a huge testament to the performance because, and I said cheekily in my review of this, that this is the performance I think Jared Leto was going for in House of Gucci with the fat suit and the prosthetic makeup. But I knew the whole time this is Jared Leto giving a performance.
I really enjoyed that part of your review. That made me laugh.
Oh yeah.
So, I now want to see a version of the internet where they cross-cut scenes from this movie with Jared Leto in it.
And it seems like an easy comparison too, because some people thought I was being too harsh. But I was like, it's the same thing. It's like they're both playing kind of these mobster like kind of vibes, and then he obviously the same level of makeup, prosthetics, all that. But the difference is I never once am sitting here thinking other than the fact that I knew that it's Colin Farrell.
It wasn't distracting.
It wasn't distracting.
Yes.
I wasn't thinking about it. I was believing him as this character, and because there's nothing recognizable about him, I was able to really just lean into the performance, and I thought he did great. So, with not even that much screen time, I thought he just had some great, just subtle moments.
A+. Yeah. No, and I'm super excited he's part of, there's actually 2 different HBO Max series they're building off of this universe, and one of them is starring Colin Farrell as the Penguin. So I'm all about more of this character, this version of the character. Yeah, I think he's a scene stealer. All right, Daniel Bokemper.
Yes.
I mean, outside of the Penguin, now that we've gushed on him, who is your favorite supporting cast member?
Okay, yeah, and I can't add anything to that conversation in general because Colin Farrell is great. I will mention him just briefly in saying that he's pretty good at portraying people who either are reminiscent of animals or want to be animals. I'm talking about the Lobster, which yes, yeah, he's great. Not much can be said. I also, of course, really enjoyed Zoe Kravitz. There is not a bad casting choice, as Laron was saying, in this film, but I think the character may have been briefly underutilized. I'm still kind of reconciling that. I will also say another character that was ultimately a bit underutilized, but was still a great performer behind them was Alfred, played by Andy Serkis. Mm-hmm. Not very much of him, but I have a feeling we'll get Andy Serkis on the rebound with Gorilla Grodd somewhere down the road.
There's a Flash movie coming later this year.
I was going to say, well, we can get you to play a CGI monkey again. Will you feel better about that? He's like, fuck it, yes, just let me put on that blue suit or whatever it is.
I liked how he wasn't really a butler. He was kind of just...
No!
He's like, I don't want to spoil anything, because I'm going to do some other shit. Like,
Well,
and how he wasn't really a father figure, and kind of, I don't know. It was
it was kind of nice to have him a little bit.
It was refreshing and seeing the 2 of them actually, which we'll get more to in spoilers, but actually seeing both of them work together on actual detective work. Like, and I'm not saying them talk about it. It's saying, oh, you see Alfred literally studying like notes and Riddler keys, and I just feel like we haven't seen that before, right? It's usually he's serving him or he gives Batman an idea and Batman goes and does the thing.
Yeah. But also not to exclude Paul Dano. Of course, who?
Yeah.
Looking at Paul Dano's filmography, sometimes I'm like, wow, you're like every role he's in is great, but it's in such little. Like there's so few performances, I think, but again, a Riddler that's both composed, but then completely goes off the rails into the madhouse when he is in the madhouse, actually, appropriately. But definitely a very good, and in a lot of ways, and what the film is trying to orchestrate is somewhat of a parallel between the Riddler and Batman. And I think Paul Dano is kind of the perfect foil to Robert Pattinson's Batman. So yeah, just great calls. Again, really, if you want to see just killer performances alone, look no further than this film.
And I remember, again, looking back at the cast of some of the old ones, I remember when we thought the Nolan movies hit it out of the park, and they did, but I just can't think of any of the Batman movies where every character is so perfectly fine-tuned and utilized like this film. I think the only thing I'd add here, we hit on all the high points. I'm just going to say John Turturro as Falcone. I just want to mention this because I barely knew he was in the movie before I went and saw it. Like, I think I read a couple days ago, I was like, oh, he's in this movie. Cool. Because they didn't play him up in the promos. And I think I expected great things from all the people we mentioned: Paul Dano, Robert Pattinson, Colin Farrell, Zoe Kravitz. I knew they were going to deliver something interesting and good, and they all hit home runs. The person I certainly didn't expect to be like so chilling was John Turturro as the Falcone, and because he's like just so emotionless, static the whole time, even when he's in the midst of like really horrifying situations. He just sits there and he just talks like this. Yeah, I just called in some favors and got XYZ murdered, and it's just he's so composed.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there because in my mind, he was the dark horse who had just came out of left field. And I was like, wow, this guy is in a very competitive scene for A+ performers. He's really stealing the thunder right now.
Quick question. Do you think this will get any nods for any of the actors, like an Oscar or Golden Globe or anything?
It's so early, and it's one of those things where I hate that this so much is done well in it that, with it being so early, once you get to Oscar season, is it going to be one of those things that like, oh yeah, remember Batman? Like, oh, that always seems to happen with a movie that comes out this early. But I definitely think, just as of right now, having not seen anything, I think it definitely would be something that would be in contention for cinematography, score. Maybe maybe a couple supporting performances. And then you never know. I mean, Black Panther got a Best Picture nomination. This is definitely better than that. So
this is the reason they. In fact, The Dark Knight was the reason they went from 5 nominations for Best Picture to 10. Again, there's so many.
It's like Batman just keeps coming in and saying like, "See, comic book movies can be something, guys." It's like the other ones can't do that, But Batman always makes a case for it, So
okay, this wasn't. Let's take that one step further, Laron, because why is that? Because I don't want to necessarily get into this whole. I don't want to get into like fanboy arguments on there. But like, here's the fact of the matter is, people were so upset that Spider-Man didn't get a Best Picture nomination, and I don't say this to say that it's a bad movie. I gave it a very good review. I love it. I love Spider-Man. I love what they did. It was a blast. But it's just not a movie that's really pushing the envelope as a film. Whereas this movie, I can look at it and say, I mean, it did some stuff I've never seen before, and not just like fan service. Like it's like, no, there were some very specific filmmaking choices where you're like, wow, I've never seen this before. And I think it goes back to Dark Knight, and what Christopher Nolan was doing with those movies did the same thing. So I think what do you think? I think Batman does push the envelope more than we've seen in most superhero films.
I just think Batman and the universe of Gotham and the politics of Gotham, and I just think that there's a lot more to mine there and kind of excavate, to get more, to find parallels with our current society and all these different things. Whereas I think Spider-Man is, again, can always be enjoyable, but I just don't feel like it ever, like you said, it kind of stays in a comfortable bubble that it doesn't have any need really to kind of escape, and I think Batman's more pliable for a lot of different things, having a lot of different kinds of conversations that are relevant or prescient in some way. So
yeah, it definitely taps on the zeitgeist in a different way. Not to say that Spider-Man and a lot of the other superheroes don't, but yeah, to Laron's point, he's way more malleable. He begs questions that just you don't get with a lot of other superhero films, or if they do, it's almost in response to a precedent that Batman himself had already set.
Right.
Very unique in that way.
Mm-hmm. Brock, any thoughts? Would you be pretty pumped to see the Batman in the Oscar conversation?
Yeah, I mean, even some performances, like you think of Colin Farrell or Paul Dano, like we said, you just don't think about who they are. Like, you're not thinking about Paul Dano as being Paul Dano or Colin Farrell as being Colin Farrell. And I think that really speaks to, one, the writing and just how grounded it was, and two, just the performances and how they really like lost themselves in that. And so, I don't know, that's kind of what I was speaking to, is like, you had Ledger in his legendary role as, as Joker. And so I feel like with today, these roles, like, I don't know, I feel like they got some supporting nods. I wouldn't scoff at it.
Well, and actually you mentioned, obviously, yes, Heath Ledger's Joker, but we can't forget Joker starring Joaquin Phoenix also got a lot of love. And in fact, Joaquin Phoenix won the Oscar. Which, by the way, that's just a terrific speech if you ever get around to watching it. I mean, it's very vulnerable in a way that I found particularly moving. But so I guess to say, I feel like, Brock, there's a possibility there, but depends on what happens between now and next, February? So got a little bit of ways to go.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it's just a quick question I want to ask about the runtime. I felt the runtime, I don't think it's a major detractor for me, but did you guys feel like it justified a 3-hour movie? Because I'm always talking about, and I feel like every movie I've watched in the last several months is 2.5 hours long or longer. And more, I'm okay with that. I'm down. But more and more, when I get to the end, I'm like, did this need to be this long? Almost every time. So I want to ask you guys, do you think this justified the 3-hour runtime? Because I do think it can be done. And Daniel, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, first of all, I'm probably not the person to ask, because I think Zack Snyder's cut of Justice League felt fine at its runtime too. So I'm in it for those long, slow, molasses-like films, including Blade Runner 2049, especially Blade Runner 2049.
See, that's a movie that's a movie that in my mind justifies the runtime. Dune justifies the runtime. Lord of the Rings: Return of the King, a 3.5 hour long theatrical cut. in my mind, justifies the runtime.
At least 3 hours and 15 minutes of it. And the same thing here. The Batman justifies 2 hours and 50 minutes of its runtime.
Right.
But there are a few there, especially one egregious scene in the final act that I feel like is completely unnecessary. But otherwise, yes, absolutely. It feels well, and it feels really good as a it's not going to be, of course, but it feels really good as a self-contained Batman too. And I think if that's what you're going for, you know, to tell an interesting, not that you need that. I guess the Mask of the Phantasm is like 85 minutes long, but I don't know. Long story short, it definitely establishes its runtime and justifies it, I think, in spades.
All right. Brock, what do you think about that?
I feel like it could have cut about 20 minutes. I felt it was a little bit long, a little bit bloated. I definitely felt it, and I definitely was like, is this okay? It's not okay. It's not done. Nope. Okay. I think 20 minutes would have been good if it had been cut. I'd have felt better.
Yeah.
Keep it short.
I'm with you on that.
I won't go long like Batman. I'll keep it at that.
I will say, Brock, one of the benefits we saw this together at the Flix Brew House is I could order a beer and have it delivered to me. And I was like, whenever I started to feel the runtime, I just was like, I'll take another.
That was why I was so mad. I was like,
we're not done here.
I was like, I gotta drive home. If this isn't any longer, I'm gonna keep drinking.
All right, Laron Chapman, what do you think?
Yeah, same thing. It's one of those things where I felt like I was never bored, and I think that's important to note because a lot of times when you ask this question, like, did it justify the runtime? Meaning, were you bored throughout the process? I was never bored, but I did feel like somewhere around the 2.5 hour mark, I think the movie had made its point.
Yeah.
And there was nothing that was said differently in the last half hour. So it wasn't that I was bored for the duration of the film. I just felt like there was nothing left to say. And so it did feel like it was just kind of spinning its wheels to its credits. And at that point, I was like, maybe it could have been, 20 minutes, half an hour shorter. And we could have still gotten everything that we got there without, So some judicious trimming. It wasn't egregious, the run length, as I thought it was when they announced it. I was like, do we need a 3 hour?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that seems pretentious. It's like, and then I watched and I was like, actually, if I enjoyed 2 hours and 45 minutes of the movie, then, then I guess, that 15 minutes, I'm not going to cry too much about, so.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Which is to say, I do, again, the movie has a really climactic moment that we'll get to in spoilers, but then they're like, oh, and there's this other thing that we've got to do. And that's the part where I was like, okay, now we're going through the motions.
Right.
This is a superhero movie, guys. We got to do the thing. Yeah. I'm not saying they do it poorly. I'm just saying that in terms of pacing, I thought up until this specific moment, I was like, this movie is immaculately paced. I love the mystery. There's actually not a ton of action in this movie other than the end and the coolest Batmobile chase in any Batman movie, hands down.
Coolest Batmobile.
I agree. Oh, yeah. The reveal, just execution, everything. My God. What a great execution.
I can't wait for spoilers. Can't wait to talk.
But I will say, so to your point though, I didn't hate that part that came after, but that's where I was like, all right, let's wrap it up because we all know how this is going to go.
Sure.
That said, kudos to this movie for really keeping me on the edge of my seat as a mystery. Yeah. And I wasn't sure a Batman movie would be able to hook me in a mystery in that way. As effectively as this film did. And up until it kind of hits that climactic moment, I thought it was just a really flawless, like, mystery story, paced really well. Not a lot of action, a lot of character drama anyway. So let's get to letter grades, and then we're going to make some recommendations for listeners, and then we're going to rank the Batman movies, and then we'll get to spoilers. So with that said, what letter grade would you give the Batman? Brock Lay, I'm going to start with you.
Well, as everyone knows, and if you check your key, a 45-degree upward thumb means A-.
A-.
As everyone knows.
Now they do.
I know that the math. Next time Brock asks me for a letter grade, I'm going to say 45 degrees.
Oh my gosh.
That's the new ranking. I'm going to go with the same letter grade. I don't have as clever a way to say it, but it's just an A- for me as well.
Awesome. So 2 A-. Daniel Bokemper.
Why am I always the lowest rated?
I thought you were the one who likes the movie the most.
I'm trying to be. I like movies, guys. I promise. No, it's a with a caveat that this will probably appreciate perhaps with time. It is a B- for me for a low flying.
a minus.
I know, low flying Batman. He's low to the ground. But again, it could appreciate in time. I am hankering for a second viewing, but again, with wanting to dig into some of the issues I may have had with it. But no, I am going to stand firm at a B- for now.
Because I'm going to give it a B+ because here's the other thing I didn't hit on, which we're going to talk about in spoilers. And the fundamental question is it possible to have another groundbreaking Batman? And the problem with this is, or a detractor, not necessarily of this film specifically, but when it has arrived in the cultural conversation around superheroes and Batman, I feel like we are not, we're being like Matt Reeves is original in this vision, but there is certainly a lot of things where you're like, this feels very familiar, even though I want to make sure I'm clear. I think it's original. It's a unique vision, but there's a certain familiarity that I felt because we've seen so many different versions of Batman up until now. And that's probably what's keeping me from the B+ to the A-, frankly. But I love this film. I'm excited to revisit it. It's in my upper echelon of Batman movies, as we'll talk about in a minute. So check it out, listeners. It's worth your time. With that said, we're going to make some alternate movie recommendations. Well, actually, it could be movies, television shows, novels, music, video games, or any other type of media recommendations for you listeners. So if you enjoy the Batman, what should you check out next? And we'll go in reverse order this time. So Daniel Bokemper, what do you recommend for the listener?
Yeah, I've got two. So if you like that sleuth that is Batman, that's really, close to the ground, but also very, intimate with Gotham and its inner workings and very just aware of his surroundings. And then you do like the kind of the modern noir frame that it delivers. I think Rian Johnson's Brick has only gotten better with age. A film that I revisited it like 2 or 3 years ago, and I want to revisit it again already. So, I would say Rian Johnson, his film Brick. And then these technically won't come up here in a moment when we're ranking our Batman films, so I don't feel bad recommending them here. But the very recent animated adaptations of The Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2, I believe they may both be available on HBO Max as of right now. They are? Okay, yes. Definitely check those out. I think if you watch them together, it's the approximate runtime of this film. So if you're okay with this one, then
I will say the part 1 ends on one hell of a cliffhanger.
Exactly.
Especially if you know the comic. You're like, that's not what happened.
Yes.
What? Oh.
Yeah. Not hard to keep watching too. So yeah, definitely check out the Long Halloween Parts 1 and 2 if you're a fan of animated Batman, because I think it's among the best animated Batman films.
I do love that recommendation, Daniel. Thank you so much for sharing. Laron Chapman, what would you recommend to the listeners?
So I have a slew of them. I have 4. I'll just say them really quickly. But basically, both of Fincher's films, I know that a lot of people have recommended them or said the film has echoes of it. But Seven and Zodiac definitely come to mind when I was watching this. But then also Chinatown and Prisoners were all films that I kind of saw inspirations from, or at least had a similar tonal experience with the film.
Prisoners, the Denis Villeneuve movie starring Hugh Jackman.
Yes.
All right, not to be mistaken with the
also starring a very deranged Paul Dano.
Oh, he's so creepy. You think he's creepy in the Batman? Just wait until you see him in Prisoners.
Yes.
Those are all excellent recommendations. Bronk Lay.
I also had 7, so I'll pivot and say another one is a TV show, True Detective. I feel like that one's a really good one to watch. Season 1 and 3. You can skip 2.
Skip 2.
What about that second season?
That didn't happen. And another kind of some vibes I got from the first act of the film, the first 30 minutes, I really just got some Crow vibes.
Yeah.
So I'll say The Crow. And if you love the climax of this film, I really, really, really recommend Hard Rain with Keanu Reeves and Morgan Freeman.
Hey.
All right.
Throwback.
All right. Very cool. Well, you guys have already said most of mine. I'm not even joking. Zodiac was my number 1. I think that one's fairly obvious, but check that film out. It just had an anniversary. 15? I think it turned 15 recently. I think that's what. So, masterpiece. That's another movie that is very long, but I think really justifies the long run time. So check that out. I would also say Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049, since Laron already said Prisoners. Daniel, you alluded to it earlier, but I think those are also excellent noir films that similarly do an incredible job of establishing an atmosphere, and there's a core mystery that's a slow burn throughout. And then if you want to go all the way back, Double Indemnity, one of the original noir films that I really think anyone who wants to be a student of film or just really loves noir, if you haven't watched Double Indemnity, check that out. It's a masterpiece in my mind. And then lastly, just on the video game side, if you haven't played them, the Arkham games are genuinely very, very good. You feel like Batman, specifically the first two, Arkham Asylum and Arkham City, A+. You get to experience most of the Batman Rogues Gallery. The story is really compelling, and biases again. It features most of the voice cast from the animated series. So you've got Mark Hamill doing the Joker, you got Kevin Conroy doing Batman. Check those out.
Can I throw one more on there?
Sure.
I will say, I was just thinking about this, but a semi-heroic character who is perhaps having a crisis with what his position in the world is or what purpose he serves, while again being thrown into just a tremendous amount of violence. Nicholas Winding Refn's Drive, starring Ryan Gosling.
Ooh, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Neo-noir.
Neo-noir, exactly, yeah. Also neo-western.
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
A lot of things. Man, that movie's a masterpiece. Another podcast, ladies and gentlemen, Drive. Check it out. All right, so the moment has arrived. The last thing we're going to do before we get to the spoiler section here is we are going to rank our preferences for the theatrically released Batman films. So I'm just going to run down the list. These are only the ones that have opened in theaters. So we have Batman the movie from 1966 starring Adam West. We have Batman 1989 starring our boy Michael Keaton from Tim Burton. And then the sequel in 1992, Batman Returns. And then the animated film based on the animated series, Batman Mask of the Phantasm in 1993. And then we have Batman Forever in 1995. Then Batman and Robin starring Bat Nipples in 1997. And then after that, we decided to pivot and go the opposite direction in 2005 with Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. And then we have the, I would argue, mythologized sequel, The Dark Knight in 2008, Dark Knight Rises in 2012. And then we show up with Batman v Superman in 2016 from writer-director Zack Snyder.
Hell yeah.
And then how could we forget the Lego Batman movie in 2017? And then, of course, we have The Batman. That's a lot of Batman movies, guys. It's just going down the list. So
It's like he's in pop culture or something. Like, why do we keep...
it's like we've seen a lot of Batman.
Yeah.
Laron Chapman, I'm going to start with you.
All right.
How would you rank the Batman movies?
I really want to see the Batman a second time to really feel out where I want to rank this, but I have it in second place. I still am pretty partial to the Dark Knight, and so I'm going to start there, and then I have the Batman in second place, Batman Returns in third place, Batman the Mask of the Phantasm in fourth place, Batman Michael Keaton, the Lego Batman, Batman Begins, Batman Forever, The Dark Knight Rises, Batman and Robin, and then in last place, Batman versus Superman.
All right.
Did you have Batman the movie
Batman the movie?
from 66?
Oh, 66.
So I don't actually have a relationship with that film, so
Okay.
I felt unfair ranking it in because I don't think I would have given it a
That
fair
is fair.
ranking. Haven't seen it, so I can't say.
Well, Laron, you're missing out on shark repellent and bombs.
I get the references. I'm totally seeing all of the, I'm familiar with Adam West's character, but I haven't, really dug into that one. So
That is a very noble choice, sir. I appreciate you for not.
I just threw that bitch in last.
because I was going to say, I would have just put it at last. What's wrong with this guy? Exactly.
All right, so those are Laron Chapman's picks. I think that's a pretty solid lineup. Mine's a little different, but first I want to hear what Brock Lay's selection is.
Oh, I'm about to piss some people off. Number 1, Batman 89. Number 2, I have Batman 22, The Batman. Number 3, Batman Returns. Number 4, Dark Knight. Number 5, Batman Forever. 6, Dark Knight Rises. 7, Batman Begins. 8, Lego Batman. 9, Batman and Robin. 10, Batman versus Superman. And then last, I have Mask of the Phantasm, which is the most boring fucking Batman movie I have ever watched in my life. And you guys are crazy for putting it up as high as you have it.
Brock, You're breaking my heart, man. I mean, if you would have put
It's 85 minutes, and I
BVS.
felt like it was longer than the Batman.
Okay, so here's the thing. If I could have forgiven you if you put it above BVS at the very bottom. But no, but BVS over it, I don't know. It's okay. You know,
To all of the listeners, this is my last podcast, I'm sure, so it's been a pleasure.
I in fact have an entirely separate podcast where I have talked about this very movie, and I think it's actually even reposted in this RSS podcast feed a couple years ago. And in fact, I will probably repost it now in case you guys didn't hear me and Joshua Unruh talk about it at Tower Theater back in 2017.
I'll listen to it and see if it changes my mind.
But I mean, it gets you get Mark Hamill's Joker bumps it up automatically a little bit, right? So okay, well,
I think I'd fallen asleep by that point.
he does. True, he doesn't show up until about halfway through. All right, well, Brock, I think that is not my selection, but I appreciate you for participating.
I told you I was the bat suit with nipples. That's what I bring to this podcast.
No, that's great. I appreciate the diversity around the table for real, though. Daniel Bokemper, how would you rank the Batman movies?
Yeah, and I'll preface with there are two films I chose not to rank just because, similar to Laron with Batman the movie from 1966, not familiar enough with it to confidently rank it. So both Batman the movie and Batman Returns from 1992 I have omitted from this list. To my understanding, I would probably love Batman Returns. I just need to watch it. But that being said, I have a double tie for both first and second place. So there's 4 movies that compose my first and second place. Number one, but kind of a tenuous number one. The first being The Dark Knight and Batman Mask of the Phantasm. Fuck you, Brock. That's great. From there, I have the Batman 2022 and Batman Begins locked at second. Beyond that, number 3 is Batman by Tim Burton from 1989. 4, The Dark Knight Rises. 5, Lego Batman Movie. 6, Batman Forever. 7, Batman and Robin. 8, BVS.
Okay, see that's where BVS belongs. Okay, so I'm very glad we're on that same page, Daniel. You could have put anything else as long as it's below Phantasm. We're good. Okay, so here's what I got: The Dark Knight, number 1. Mask of the Phantasm, number 2. The Batman, number 3. Number 4, Batman Begins. Number 5, Batman 1989. Number 6, Batman Returns. Number 7, the Lego Batman Movie. Number 8, Batman 1966. Number 9, The Dark Knight Rises. Number 10, Batman Forever. Number 11, BVS Dawn of Justice, with the one note being that it's the ultimate cut, not the theatrical cut. And then below that is Batman and Robin. And I also want to point out, I actually find a lot to like about Batman and Robin, despite it being what it is. Bat-skates and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I only ranked Batman versus Superman above Mask of Phantasm because my mom's name is also Martha, so...
Oh. It's personal.
I'm totally lying. I'm just kidding. I was just trying to make up for putting it above Phantasm.
No, hey, listen, Brock, it's okay. It's okay. You know, that's a whole other podcast. We don't have to follow this one up sometime. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have in our spoiler-free review. What did you think of the Batman? Let us know by sending me an email at thecinematropolis@gmail.com. Without further ado, though, we're going to go ahead and jump into the spoiler section for the Batman.
And then he had us.
Lights out! Now you want to get nuts? Come on! Let's get nuts.
Tell me something, my friend. You ever danced with the devil in the pale moonlight? What? I always ask that of all my prey. I just like the sound of it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, to reiterate, we're in the spoiler section, so we're going to spoil everything that happens at the end of this movie. So I'm actually going to break this down by a few different topics. Topic number 1 being, is this the most noir Batman in Gotham yet? And what I mean is, as we alluded to and referenced in our spoiler-free section, this movie is a slow burn detective story. It opens with, it's bookended actually, with monologues or voiceover. The first of which is intriguing because it's the first one. The second of which is, in case you didn't get the point of the story, I got to represent hope too.
Yeah. Which can be all bad.
Which again, speaks to the fact that, hey, guys, just want to throw this out there. This guy doesn't just straight up murder people gleefully. It's so refreshing to see Batman not gleefully murder people on the screen. Sorry, Ben Affleck.
Yeah.
It was very nice for them to go the way. But that said, is this a noir Batman? So we look at Michael Keaton's, that there's definitely like an influence of the noir. There's the Chris Nolan films, which are definitely neo-noir. But I want to discuss if this movie really sets itself apart effectively. So, Laron, I'm going to start with you. How would you say this film sets itself apart from previous iterations of the character?
I love the way they leaned into the noirish aspects of the story. I felt like that's what separates it, from the other iterations of it. And so much so that I was like, remove the mask, remove this aspect of it, this would still be a compelling story to kind of follow. And I think so on that level, also it's nice just seeing Bruce Wayne be, this character that's, on one end, I kind of saw him and the Riddler, as I kind of, bear with me, as political figures, and they're both imperfect, and they both have their own extremes for how they're going to execute their plans. But I was rooting for both of them at various times, and I found that to be the kind of compelling component about this, is that the villain, there's a blurred line there because they both got good points,
Yeah, and he's taking care of like clearly corrupt people initially.
Absolutely. And it feels like Batman is fighting the blue collar crime, and then, the Riddler's fighting white collar crime.
Oh. Yeah.
And so
Yep.
and they just have their own methods for how they expose this. And like Batman's brutal with the people that are committing these crimes on the ground level, just as the Riddler is, but why do we trade one for the other and say one's doing it right and one's doing it wrong? You know what I mean? So I felt that way. That I love that kind of moral dilemma they had with that. And I think that the noirish aspects of the story really lent itself to that, because the detective's always the brooding kind of like, he's doing the right thing, but it's a seedy environment, and sometimes you got to get your hands dirty to get your.
So, are you speaking of the blurred line, and you feel like Batman feels he's doing it for the good, and everybody says Riddler's doing it for the bad. But you think about the means in which they go about it. At the opening of the film, the Riddler's looking in on the mayor, and he's spying on him through his window. And then you look further on in the film, Batman is spying on Zoe Kravitz as the Catwoman through her window. So it's like that same like parallel. And it's just like, oh, he's doing it as intel, like, oh, he's trying to figure out what's going on. And the Riddler's doing it, is in a sinister way. But it's like, it's bad either way. You shouldn't be looking through someone's window. So it's, again, like you said, Laron, that's that blurred line of where it comes into.
Well, and I love it because in the noir, your protagonist is frequently questionable. Is this an unreliable narrator? Is this guy actually a good guy?
Right.
I think a lot of the best noir films out there, Maltese Falcon, Double Indemnity, which I referenced earlier, like it gets into that question of like, okay, you're following this guy and you like him because he's the protagonist, but is he really doing the right thing? And Laron, on that note, and I'll get more into this in the second section, but the idea that the Riddler is actually one step ahead of Batman is pretty impressive. There's a point in the film where Batman says we're playing his game whether we like it or not. This is a position we haven't seen Batman in, actually solving a case. We always get, like the Dark Knight, there was some stuff with the Joker where they did this really cool thing where they duplicate the bullets and stuff like that. It was really quick, but this whole movie is about the process
and
of unraveling.
And the process is fascinating, and I think that's what it was. That's what justified most of the runtime for me. It was like just all the minutia, just the small victories, like the little how he came about. I found all of that, the mechanics of it, to be a lot more interesting than the abbreviated version when let's just get to the action and forget the fact that Batman is also this really intelligent, person. And I found that very interesting for sure.
Well, and this sort of harkens back to some of the influences here. I mean, we have things like Seven, most specifically, where we're talking about a villain who sees himself as a hero because he is taking out the people who have actively made people's lives worse because they've manipulated and gamed the system in their favor. That's pretty compelling, right? Why would Batman want to stop that guy, right? And as we find out later in the film, his dad's hands might be dirty even. There's a point in the movie where they even question, like, maybe your entire belief in your father is a lie.
Fabricated, yeah.
Fabricated, yeah. So Dan, I'll turn to you. I mean, like, did you think that there was a really fresh noir take for audiences?
Yeah, it was grim, it was bleak, and it was also very real, but at the same time, it doesn't sacrifice that classic Batman campiness that we don't get any of in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. It's a particularly human, I think, rendition of the Caped Crusader, which is funny because, again, we don't have the human element is almost absent in some ways with very minimal Bruce Wayne. But at the same time, I like that we are introduced to the film. What's the phrase? In medias res. Like we're just thrown in to the Batman 2 years in, and despite being 2 years in, he's still not good enough. He's not. Now the city has this Batman. They have a hero that they apparently needed. But as he puts it in his own words, he still has to push harder. In that opening dialogue, he's still not quite there yet, and I really like that because one of my. And Caleb, I know you might disagree with me, and anyone welcome to disagree, but I think one of the problems I have with Nolan and his Batman, his rendition of Bruce Wayne, is that he becomes kind of almost a very capable Batman very, very, very quickly. And even by the end of this film, I'm not on board that this is a particularly effective Batman, and I like that. Like he is and I know that The Dark Knight has the whole. He's the Batman Gotham needs right now or whatever. I know they play with that idea, but I don't actually think they really commit or present it very well, whereas this film does. And it doesn't need to say it overtly. It doesn't need to do it, even though, again, there are the film does kind of lay out its thesis in the form of a closing monologue that's completely unnecessary. Again, this is a very imperfect film in a lot of ways, as Laron said, but it's also a different take. I think very satisfying. I think checks a lot of boxes that a lot of superhero films just simply don't. And then it also, it nods to things. There's a very overt Zodiac. I see it, but I still lean on, Seven as the Fincher film that I think carries the most influence on this one. But it doesn't feel like derivative. It doesn't feel like, until maybe the very end, it kind of leans on those films to try and build something that it inherently didn't have. But I would say it's more of an homage in that way, more of a nod. And I think in some ways it kind of like creatively pokes the bear that is Nolan's trilogy. I think of the I call it the flying squirrel sequence for lack of a better term, but it's the parallel to that, when he's escaping the police custody and he takes the winged bat suit. And I just watching The Dark Knight so recently, seeing that sequence in the first act of the film where he's going to get that international executive, and he does a very, very, very well executed like bat glide into a skyscraper. And this Batman, all he's doing is just running away, and he eats shit when he performs his bat glide. And I think that just speaks to this film, and it speaks to this film of not taking itself too seriously, but also looking at like, this is not a perfect Batman. 2 years in, this Batman has issues. And I just think it really explores that in a way that no other rendition of Batman has.
I'd agree that it explores it differently. I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't agree or disagree with you. I think the Nolan take is fundamentally different. I know it's easy. Yeah. It is very easy to compare them because that was the last standalone version, and they are both noir in their own way. Whereas I really think this movie is channeling classic noirs.
Yes.
Whereas Nolan's neo-noir. And to your point, we get to see Batman train with ninjas in Batman Begins. Whereas this one, we don't really. I guess we just can assume that probably happened. We don't really know.
I almost get this like Old Boy vibes. Really, like, does 10 years of imaginary training actually mean you can fight, or whatever the famous line is.
But you're right though, because Nolan's films, I think, Nolan's films are much more interested in the big questions, the big ideas, the big set pieces. Whereas we mentioned a second ago, like this movie is way more interested in the process.
Yeah.
And when you're doing that stuff, like, okay, you want to glide, how would that actually work? Oh, it wouldn't really work very well, would it? At least on your first time, right?
Smack the pavement.
So I don't think you're. It's not a agree or disagree. It's just I don't think it's. I think it's a different take.
Sure.
But Brock, what do you think about the noir take here? I mean, is this you mentioned this was maybe your favorite Gotham yet?
Yeah, it was. To speak, I forgot about the bat squirrel suit. That was my least favorite shot of the movie, where it went with the GoPro scene, where it was like not first person, where it showed his face and he's like gliding. I was like, that's the worst shot I've ever seen. Like that totally pulled me out of the movie in that moment.
Which is weird because I'm like the motorcycle sequence actually worked pretty well.
I dug the motorcycle sequence where it's like literally the camera angle is at his foot, watching him shift gears.
Yeah.
To a Nirvana song, and you're just like, that's fucking cool. And then I don't know, when he's gliding, it just seemed kind of funny.
Yeah.
I did feel like watching this version of Gotham, I did love it, but it also made me want to see the weather app for Gotham to see how much it fucking rains. In Gotham.
It's like, nighttime.
It's like,
precipitation.
Expect 100% rain as soon as dusk hits.
It's in the second the sun rises, it's beautiful and orange and like twilight colored. Yes.
And in case somebody got it, that's why I had the hard rain reference. Because it just rains so damn much, and I don't know, it just killed me. But it was beautifully shot, and I really liked how like this city. But the thing that I felt was a different iteration of the character is if you think back to all the other films, you do see Bruce Wayne more, but you see him as going to parties, being a businessman, being someone who keeps up that front of party boy or businessman, like, you know, making sure that his company is on the up and up so he can maintain what he's doing. And in this one, he does not care. He doesn't want to go to parties. He doesn't care about the business. He doesn't care if it fails because he has one mission and one goal in mind.
He's very disinterested in that aspect of his life.
Yeah.
And it's to fulfill his purpose of ridding Gotham of evil. And, you know, it's 2 years in. And one thing that I really loved about it was how tactical the suit is. It's not sleek. It's not, I mean, as you say, it's not like a sexy suit. It's not, you know, it doesn't form, it form fits, but it has like things hanging off of it. You know, like he has like a fucking fanny pack full of smoke bombs. Who knows?
It's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress. And that's what made it so much more real. It's just like, there's not all these like hidden compartments where shit really wouldn't be. It's like, oh, this is what I have, and this is how I have to carry it. And this is what happens. And I thought that was, I don't know. I thought that was a pretty cool way to represent that.
God, that's such a good take. It almost made me forget that Brock said fucking Mask of the Phantasms.
I remember. Brock, that was a great point. But it's rendered completely invalid. Yes. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. That's not true. No, it's not true. No, I mean, I think I'm with you guys. This is such a lived-in world. It's so visceral, and the attention to detail on everything, from the way it rains to the club. The Iceberg Lounge felt like a seedy underworld spot. When they're going down the highway at night, we'll get to the chase here in a couple of minutes, but like that whole presentation just felt like it was ripped from like an old movie in the best way possible. I wouldn't say the French Connection's a noir per se, but like I definitely felt like Matt Reeves is like, what is the coolest car chase scene I've ever seen? How can I do this at nighttime in the rain with the Batman, right? And how can I make that as cool as possible? So I just again think the production design. We look at the Nolan films, it's Chicago, right? I mean, especially The Dark Knight, like they literally it's just Chicago. And that's not a bad thing. That was what those movies were going for. It's fine. We go to 1989, Tim Burton, Michael Keaton. It feels kind of like a set, like a play. Not in a bad way. I want to make sure it's clear. It feels very theatrical in the way everything looks. And, you know, it feels like it's out of some imagined Gothic stage play.
Well, you think of like those old World's Fair posters and how everything was so architectural and just Gothic. Like that's just what those look like. They took those straight off of those posters.
Yeah. What's the movement? Is it German Expressionists? Like the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari?
Yes.
Very.
Especially Batman Returns, Daniel. It leans even more to that, actually.
I need to watch that.
I'll be very excited for you to watch that.
So excited. I'm going to have to have a follow-up podcast. And then even going to the animated series. And the reason I bring that up is because one of the things that sets that animated series, including Mask the Phantasm, apart from others, is it is very committed to the Art Deco thing. So the last thing I want to say is the one thing I love about this Gotham is, much like the animated series, even though there are smartphones in this movie and there's some modern tech, the way they position it and how it sort of meshes with the rest of the city and the world they built, everything's sort of heightened in a way that I feel like it's timeless. Like the animated series, what's great is like, yeah, it's Art Deco, and then they've got modern tech, but then they've got dudes driving cars that look like they're out of the 40s with like old school guns and stuff. It feels like it could happen at any time, and I feel the same way about Matt Reeves's reality and Gotham he's created here.
Well, like with the contact lenses, like those aren't completely out of the question. Yeah. Like that's the kind of the highest tech thing that's here, and that's like I could totally see that. Being real. Like, so yeah, like I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's Google Glass, basically. Like it's
Facebook's got glasses coming out that basically do that, right?
Yeah.
I guess one note on the tech here, I think we'll talk more specifically about what sets this Batman apart here in a couple minutes. But what I want to say about that is I do feel like all the technology presented from Batman, way more so than the Nolan films, feels like something some guy actually just put together. Like with the resources available to him.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about with Nolan too, with like the Batman that's just super perfect. It's because it's like he gets all the like the most optimal versions of the technology he could possibly use immediately. Like it's there.
Well,
like,
I want to make sure it's clear. I think that's a cool take in the way, but the explanation they have is kind of lame, which is, oh, we're going to fold all of this into the R&D budget at Wayne Enterprises.
Yes.
No, surely no one's going to notice it. And they even call it out in The Dark Knight how it's kind of silly, but like
it just allows you to insert anything for any perfect situation, whereas this Batman has to get very creative.
Yes,
yeah.
agreed.
Well, in Nolan, he had like what the infinite garage that like underneath there.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Like, give me a fucking break.
Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. And so anyway, I just think it's cool that the Batmobile is like a giant, hyper beefed up muscle car. The kind of the glide is just like you guys said, it's the flying squirrel. The Batarangs, they aren't perfectly shaped.
Spent hours like this is gonna work. This is gonna work. And just
I like to think that Matt Reeves watched F9 and watched the car that went into outer space with the big thing on the back, and he's like, "Oh, that'd be a dope Batmobile," and just made it black, and just spray painted it black. And called it
when
a
you
day.
guys are done with that, could I use that for my movie?
Right. So the last thing I want to say about Gotham specifically before we get really into the weeds on the Riddler stuff, because I think there's a lot of fun stuff to talk about with the Riddler, but this is probably, in my opinion, the richest portrayal of Batman's relationship to the police. We get a really good, I want to make sure that Dark Knight specifically has a really good sequence in the middle where he's partnering with the police, but you don't see a lot of, outside of with Gordon, you don't see a lot of interactions in Batman with other police. I love this version where he literally just walks onto a crime scene. The other cops are like, are we just going to let him do this? And they're like, well, he's the Batman. What are you going to let him do? And then Gordon says, yeah, he's good by me. He's in, and the rest of the cops don't know whether they can trust him or not, even though he's there the whole time.
Well, and also Gordon's authority is like still questionable at this time. He's still up and coming. Again, he is not the commissioner yet. Only year 2, as Brock said earlier. Like, so it's interesting to see that dynamic, you get a lot of that very precarious relationship, which again, I don't see explored particularly well, because like with Ben Affleck's Batman, he's so above anything the authorities could possibly do. The police don't matter. Here, they do matter. And again, I think it's illustrated really effectively, as you said.
Well, even if you go back to the older films, I mean, like both the Michael Keaton films, I mean, his relationship with the police is a non-relationship. Like, it's like, yeah, him and Gordon are buddies, really, but how often is he actually planning, to foil the criminal with the police? And we don't see that a lot in this movie. One of my favorite comedic beats in the whole thing is whenever Batman's in the room and the guy's like, Gordon, you got to handle this guy, and Gordon's like, I can persuade him. And he's like, all right, either I need to hit you or you need to hit me really hard.
Yeah. Well, you think about it, it's year 2, and he already comparing to the other movies, it's year 2 and he's already coming on to crime scenes, and I don't know. So there's just that big difference too, because in the other ones, he didn't really have that relationship with the police whenever he was like far down the line. And in this one, it's year 2. He's already done enough to kind of garner not so much the respect, because he does get kind of thrown some shit from some people, but they know that he has credibility and they know that he helps. So that's, I don't know, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing I would say here too is the people who are in the upper echelons of authority at the police do not want him around because it's a risk that they'll get exposed.
Yes.
Which this movie head on takes that on, which is just, I thought was really, really, really impressive. Laron, did you make anything of the relationship to the police?
Well, yeah, and I also feel like just in general with Gotham, his relationship to the police corruption, and just the parallels to today were very interesting. And I don't think all of the wokeness was necessary. In essence, there's an instance where, for example, Catwoman says, it's just a bunch of white privileged men that are kind of like, wow, we're going like current times, like we're talking about, these crimes. And I'm not saying that's not relevant. It's just that was those little aspects that were too on the nose made me feel a little bit like, okay, this is about right now. Like they're trying to comment on the space that we're in. But I still felt like just, again, the parallels between like corrupt politicians, the way our government's run, it just felt very, I thought that added an interesting social commentary, into this universe that, hopefully ages well. That's my only thing is like normally when you make it so current 10 years from now, will it feel a little dated? Will we be somewhere else? Or will corruption just always be around so it'll always be relevant like racism?
Yeah. No, I think the movie begs a good question. I think this is a good transition to our next section. We're going to talk a little about how satisfying the mystery of the Riddler was. But like the idea that, Laron, you opened up with this, the idea that the system is so corrupt and it's not just a couple of people. It's not just a couple of bad eggs. It's the whole system. It goes all the way up. Not saying everyone who participates is corrupt, but the system is built upon corrupt people. They have built up
protecting those people too, self-policing those people. So
is the Riddler a bad guy for taking them down?
That's what I'm saying. It never felt. I mean, minus his demented schemes, I'm just like, he makes a good point.
He was we lift up Robin Hood. So
right.
We were good, and then until we found out he was recruiting incels on the internet, and then all of a sudden we're like, okay, maybe
You're so close, bud.
The Riddler is literally like the embodiment of cancel culture. Just kind of like, it's like, listen, expose him. So that's what it feels like. But
well, let's talk a little bit about that. Like like you said, Laron, expose him. So expose the corruption. The Riddler's scheme here is to expose Gotham's corruption by holding the entire city hostage. Because let's remember, he does in fact try to flood the entire city. And he is taking the Batman on in a game of cat and mouse. So I just want to get everyone's thoughts around, how well do you think this mystery unfolded? And did you really find the motivation reveals particularly compelling? Laron?
I found the journey very compelling. I found the impact just a little lacking.
Yeah.
So I felt like as it's going along, I loved the mechanics of it. I love the little reveals along the way. I just think that the culmination of it in the end, because it kind of is all leading to like the final thing is unmasking the Batman. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the final act of this. It's like you're the final part of the puzzle, But then when we get to that point, it's like they kind of backpedal a little bit, especially the conversation that Bruce Wayne has with Alfred. It feels very like, we led you to believe this whole time that maybe the Waynes were super corrupt as these people, but then he very quickly reminds us, in that moment that no, you're mistaken. They did this for this and this and this reason. You know what I mean? So it just kind of like...
I would still argue the movie tries to make you feel like what they did was not as bad as we were initially led to believe, but I still think what they did... You went to the mob to solve your problems. It's not a super flattering look, you know?
Like they did it, and it's basically the position he's taking as Batman is just very much like, I'm not going about it maybe the best way, but my intentions were good, right? It's like that's what it kind of feels like, but... And I almost wish that if they were going to go all that route, it might have pissed off some fans because, again, I haven't read the comic book, so I couldn't say how accurate it would be. But if they, actually did like demonize the Wayne Empire and the Wayne legacy and say, hey, your dad was actually not that good of a guy, and then what that means for Batman and how would he reflect on that and how would he use that in his missions moving forward? Am I going to change the narrative or move along with it, or I'm going to fall in line with it like everyone else says.
Yeah, it feels like a kind of disappointingly safe.
Yeah, it's like they built it up like it's gonna be. It's like we're gonna get this. Like the big thing is that you're gonna find out that your whole thing is all was all a lie and all this, and then you find out actually it wasn't that bad.
That was the part of the movie that kind of went off the rails for me because it went a direction, went another direction, went back to the direction that. You thought it was going, and I'm just like, okay, that's where the 20 minutes for me could have been cut. Because I'm just like, you're trying to do too many little curveballs to like keep the mystery going, but now it's just getting kind of
Yeah.
Yeah, and at the same time, the pivotal, and I actually spoke with Caleb about this not too long ago. The Riddler's point is, yes, he can basically is all but certain, I guess, that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same person, and he keeps that in his back pocket to always have that like perpetual leverage, because for the Riddler, it's about the game. You know, it's
I don't feel like he knew Bruce Wayne was Batman.
he had doubts. He wasn't able to at least like he didn't feel
ambiguous.
confident enough to publish it. I wish they framed that a little bit better. I wish they kind of dug into that a little bit more.
In my mind, he tried to kill Bruce Wayne, but he's using Batman as he's sending him all these clues because he thinks Batman's doing the same thing that he's trying to do, but Batman's the muscle, and so I don't ever feel like he knew that they were one and the same.
I think he came very, very close enough to be able to try and get in Bruce/Batman's head. I don't think that is an interesting take, though. I didn't think about it that way, but
because he speaks of how he almost got Bruce Wayne, almost got him, and he's talking to Batman.
yeah.
So I don't, but
Then he does that very hushed, like Bruce Wayne, like he yells it at him basically
Yeah.
to try and elicit an emotional response. And so I mean, I think he does, but he doesn't. And maybe that's how they tried to like demonstrate that, like because again, like for classically, the Riddler knows. It's just
It's a lever. I think so. The Riddler's obsessed with like he's one of those super criminals that likes to put clues in plain sight.
Yeah.
You know, he's got a huge ego. He really touts that he's smarter than Batman. He likes the game though, like you said, Daniel. But also, I would say to Brock's point, I really do think the movie does keep it ambiguous. As in, if they showed up in the next movie and we found out definitively one way or the other, I think it could go either way.
Yeah.
I will say though, I just want to call out the scene that you're referencing where Batman and the Riddler have the scene in Arkham. Probably my favorite scene in the whole movie. It's incredible. Paul Dano is just swinging for the fences, and I just love how sure he was that Batman was going to side with him.
Yeah.
And like when he short circuits, when it goes a different way, is incredible. I thought, and that's the climactic moment where the movie then takes a way less interesting direction.
Well,
Good.
oh, sorry, and that's just the thing. I will say, just it's and that's probably my biggest. This what drags the film down to the low B- I gave it, which is still a good film, by the way. I feel like I need to stress that I still liked it, but I think it's like you set up this increasingly severe battle of wits, only for it to resolve with basically a traditional superhero spectacle, and that's what disappoints me the most. And I wish we just got that, because that's what the film was kind of building towards. I understand the need for some action, but the Penguin kind of helps us fill that void. Like, we don't need the Riddler to assemble, even though it makes sense that he would assemble a bunch of Proud Boys to try and shoot up
the threat or the inclusion of spectacle isn't what bothers me. It's that the climax of the movie always hinges on it. So wouldn't it be amazing if I'm not a filmmaker. Laron, you're a filmmaker. You can tell me, but
Occasional filmmaker.
I know it's not. I know it can't be easy, but it would just be so cool if we got a. And actually, I would argue, despite it being a little too long, The Dark Knight, 2008, the emotional stakes of that movie hinge on not an action scene, and it is when Harvey Dent has, the kids hostage at the end of that, and that's the whole soul of the movie is on the line in a very quiet, dark, upsetting sequence. Yeah, I know you just got done with a big set, really, we were talking about like overly long set piece, but at the end of the day, the thing the movie hinges on is a person making very human choices.
Yeah.
And I just feel like there are very, 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 very few superhero films that choose to do that. They instead do the other thing where they're like, they have a choice and then big, giant, over the top spectacle to solve the problem.
Well, and that's what I think. I think it begs that question too, in considering and evoking Bruce Wayne's name. I know, again, Bruce Wayne is a minor presence in this film, but I think that's exactly the point, in that the Batman, and Bruce Wayne almost can't exist at the same time. Like the Batman, like Bruce Wayne has to sacrifice being a person in order to facilitate the Batman. And I think they may have approached that question, and they just didn't want to answer it very meaningfully, and that's why it's kind of disappointing in that way, I think.
And the closing, his arc too, like Batman's arc, like the closing monologue that we get, the hopefulness one, the one aspect, I just wish we hadn't gone here. Like, I feel like there was a subtler way to do this, and I really think it already existed in the film.
Yep.
I liked the scene. My favorite sequence was whenever. Don't totally agree with the third act action spectacle set piece, but there's a moment at the end of it where the city's been flooded and all the people are kind of shrouded in, they're in the water, and Bruce, they have that aerial shot where they're all kind of hesitant to trust even Batman. Yep. And then he guides them, you know what I mean? And they all kind of follow behind him I felt like that was like the moment where it's like we can get that moment of change and feel that moment like he's transitioning into that space without this monologue explaining that I need to choose hope instead of, because we got it right there. He's the shadows, but here he is. He's the light in this moment where he's leading them out.
Interesting about that is I knew he was going to say hope before he said it. Whenever it was that part, that's where it got, and I was like, okay, I know what's going on. Whenever that scene was, he had the flare and he was guiding people out. I thought of Superman. Whenever then the new Superman with Henry Cavill, where he's this godlike presence and everybody are like around him, and that's what I thought of, and so that kind of pulled me away from it. So it's funny how we have those thoughts of you see it way and I see it a different way, because that kind of is what pulled me out of it a little bit further. So I was like, this is going back to the Snyder verse kind of
on the nose imagery.
Yeah. And that's why, like, in the three acts of this movie, the first act is completely Matt Reeves, completely original. The second act, I feel like he tries to get into the Nolan aspect of it, and in the third, I feel like he goes not full Snyder, but he goes superhero mode with it, and where everything has to land perfect. Everything has to be the exact science, the exact physics for it to work. And it's just like you had this entire reality and this entire thing that was going with you, like where it was like not perfect because it's the real world. And then in this last act, you cut this thing perfectly, you swing perfectly, you land perfectly.
It's too tidy at the end. It was messy, and then it's clean at the end.
And I think with him guiding them out, that was another one of those like two perfect things where it was a cool shot. Like the shot was beautiful. Yeah. But the meaning behind it was another one of those like, that's too perfect. And that was for me. So it's I like that, and I like that you saw it different because everybody, had a different take on it.
Well, Brock, here's the one thing I think we can all agree on about the final act is the good news is the Gotham Square Garden has been destroyed.
Oh,
so
yes, God,
we don't have to have that in the sequel.
But like even with the Riddler, like how I said, he thought him and the Batman were working together in his mind. He's sending him clues saying, "This is where you need to look next." He sent the clues, bring him into the light, and he brought Falcone out. And he brought him to where he was visible outside of his safety net. And that's where Riddler knew to take the shot. And he's like, Batman's helping me. He's getting these clues and he's knowing what I need from him.
And do you think he believes that, or do you think that's him manipulating him?
I literally think that he believes that.
He believes it, yeah.
Because he believes that Batman's fighting the same fight he's fighting, and that's why he thinks he's right.
Yeah,
he thinks he's not a villain. He thinks he's a
much
good
more
person.
interesting take.
And I think it's compelling, and I actually tend to side. I'm actually with you on Brock on this because Laron, I know it's a little on the nose with the quote unquote wokeness, but we do live in a time when QAnon believers are real. Yeah, and it's like
Capitol riots. I mean,
people see what they want to see. Something will happen, and they'll be like, see, this is the thing I said would happen, or this is the thing I expected to have happen, even if it's like some wild thing that occurred.
Batman's just the more sophisticated version of what I'm doing here.
I think he really thought
the muscle.
I really think
aspect of
the scene where they have that face off. I really think that's when I think he believed up until that moment that him and Batman were working together. Yeah, and that's why he freaks out whenever he's like, "This wasn't how it happened.
This wasn't the plan."
Yeah,
yeah.
I thought we were friends.
Great scene.
Yeah. Well, and I will say to Brock's point too that that perpetual dangling carrot too that the Riddler has. It's just a reminder that this Batman is imperfect, because as much as he's able to quickly solve these riddles, he's always throughout this film just 5 minutes too slow. maybe until the finale.
Yeah.
He's just behind it, and really even like I think the bigger. Well, no, I'm not going to quantify whether or not a group of Proud Boys successfully shooting up a political candidate is less dangerous than a city flooding, but like he doesn't prevent the city from flooding ultimately. Like he doesn't stop that. It's still, again, it just speaks to that imperfect Batman, which I think is something
But he's still there. But the thing that's important is he's there to save them.
he does get there. Yeah. And he is still going to, and despite not being able to prevent the crime, which is the point, is he's there to at least see it to the end.
Right.
Yeah.
But
Well, I spoke on Matt Reeves having 3, acts to this. His original version in the middle was kind of Nolan, and the end was kind of the superhero. I kind of wish he would have went full Schumacher whenever the city was flooded and had a bat jet ski
oh yeah.
that Batman rode around on.
I mean, he already had a.
If he had, that would have been my favorite gadget.
No, I'm kidding. But one thing
With
about
shark repellent too.
With
Just
shark
shoot shark
obvious.
repellent. You see the shark,
Obvious.
their dorsal fins slowly just go away.
one thing about the Riddler
today.
was his videos where his breathing.
Yeah.
I don't know, because we're talking about the Riddler. Like Paul Dano killed it on this. Like he legitimately like John Doe in 7 is a scary figure, and he's not imposing, but he's scary as hell. And Paul Dano's kind of the same in this. The outfit helps being imposing, but like his mannerisms in his videos and how he talks, it's just like
Well, when you see him murder that guy in the first scene,
Yes,
it's
exactly.
just the way he's like freaking out about it is just skin crawling.
Well,
Yes.
his intro, like just when they walk, he's in the shadows, like you walk past him, it's very eerie, and he has this, kudos to his performance because, like we don't see him until the end of the film. So his whole performance is, it's you know what I mean? He's menacing without us ever seeing his face.
Another parallel. He works in the shadows, Batman. Like there's just so many parallels between the two that's just like one's good and he's doing damn near the exact same thing that Riddler's doing.
Exactly, and it begs the question: when you choose to weaponize fear, that is a very dangerous game you're playing. Like,
Right. Well, I think this is actually a good transition point, but first I will just echo Paul Dano kills it. Last thing I would say is I really like how he's a cross between Zodiac and Jigsaw from the Saw franchise with the traps and everything, especially the one with the rat cage on the guy. I was like, oh, this is totally a Jigsaw trap.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I think the Riddler worked really well. But like transitioning into, the idea that this is a fresh take on Batman. I have a genuine question, and I mentioned this in the spoiler-free section. I think my biggest challenge with this film is that it's not this film's fault, but I feel like it is just increasingly challenging to have a truly groundbreaking, I'm not saying fresh, I'm saying groundbreaking take on the character Batman. Mm-hmm. And we were even talking, off mic about what sets The Dark Knight apart. Why do people lift this up as like a masterpiece, a perfect masterpiece? It's my number 1. I don't think it's perfect. I think the thing is, we had never seen anyone do anything remotely like that with a comic book adaptation at that time.
yeah,
And now we have every version of Batman seemingly imaginable. Mm-hmm. We've got Michael Keaton's Batman. We got Batman the Animated Series, which is like a take on a traditional classic Batman. We've got Ninja Batman in the animated form. We've got Murderous Batman and Ben Affleck. Like we've got animated versions of Murderous Batman. The Dark Knight Returns, the animated version. There are, in fact, there's a Keanu Reeves is about to voice Batman in the Super Pets movie coming out later this year. Yeah, right. Like we are so oversaturated with superheroes, but I would even say more specifically Batman, because he's probably the most famous, if not maybe Spider-Man, like the most financially successful superhero ever. So we are just getting seemingly infinite versions of it.
Yeah.
So I think my struggle with this film is, even though this might be the best production I've seen of Batman, and I think just the attention to detail and the performances and the consistency might be the best, but yet when I walk away, I feel like it's really good, but I feel like I've seen this before. Not like as a whole, but little bits and pieces, even though it's a unique take. I'm like, this is a familiar theme. We've been here. We've done this. So the question I just have for you all is, is there really room for a unique take on Batman? Or do we just need to settle for, hey, every once in a while, a filmmaker's going to show up with a different take. We really hope it's one of the better ones, because I certainly think Matt Reeves is one of the best ones, but it's just another take. Does this take away from you at all the quality of this film? Brock, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of disagree with what you were saying because in this, Batman has always been the world's greatest detective. Never in any other film has he been other than this one. So he's really true to form in this movie.
Fair.
So he actually does detective work. He actually, kind of encapsulates what Batman's always been. Another thing, whenever you think about any previous Batman movie, even the original with Keaton, 1 and 2, Nicholson stole the show as Joker. In the second one, I feel like it was pretty equal amongst them. Everybody talked kind of about, Michelle Pfeiffer being Catwoman because of what she represented. With the Nolan films, it was never about Christian Bale. It was always about who was the villain. Even in the Batman Begins, we had, Argo, and then we had Scarecrow, and people were talking more about Bale gaining weight from the machinist more so than about the actual Batman. 2, it was Joker. 3, it was,
Tom
Hardy and how his fucking voice sounded. This is the first Batman that we've ever really had where people have been focused on
The story.
How did his voice sound, by the way? I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have to sneak it in here. Hold on. Why do you shoot the man before throwing him out of a plane? Yes.
We'll have audio captions in post.
People already hate us for all the voices we've done on this episode. It's okay.
But I mean, this is the first one where it's like, this is about the story, but it's also about Batman. People are talking about Robert Pattinson and how awesome he does in this role and how, physical he is and how brooding he is and how like the fight scenes are. And it's really good. Like that's why it's a good Batman film, because people are focusing on the title character and they never have before. And not only is he, one of the best Batmans, and I say this with the cowl on, he's the best looking Batman. The cowl is perfect. They don't have the pointed nose. They have a flat nose that comes to a point in his jawline, his amount of scruff. And I know it's so funny saying that, but like whenever you can't see someone's face, you focus on other features. Yeah. And how he looks is like the perfect encapsulation of what Batman should represent and look like. And it just kind of pulls you in that much further to like the mythos and how, you expect Batman to be. So that is why I disagree with you. I respect your opinion so much, Caleb, all the time.
I'm posing the question. Though. I'm being genuine. That was how I felt. I know. I
said that because I feel bad saying I disagree with you. I feel like I was being an asshole.
You can. No. It's okay. I mean, I did already shit all over you for not liking Mask of Phantasm, so it's okay.
Appropriately.
I will take that to the grave. That will be on my tombstone now. Hated Mask of Phantasm. And my grave will be spray painted and desecrated for the rest of my life. But yeah, that's what I have. Bell was carried by the villains, and I feel like Pattinson will only enhance them because of how good he is. Right. So that's my take on why this was a fresh Batman detective, the damn jawline and scruff, and then of course his acting prowess and how he was actually written.
All right,
and I'll leave it.
I think that is a very compelling case.
Yeah.
So, Laron, I'm going to turn to you. What do you think?
So we're using the word groundbreaking. Will there be another groundbreaking Batman? I don't think so. I don't think there will be. I think but this is, again, with us saying this is probably one of the strongest iterations of it. It has this, again, it's interesting social political commentary. We can always, this feels like the most sturdy and most kind of on a technical achievement, one of the best iterations of it. So I think, no, we probably won't find another groundbreaking one because I think we have mined this to death, to the point of whatever. It's just a matter of, can the character be used in a way, that warrants another franchise, another sequel. And I think that I went into this film knowing, like, I like Matt Reeves, love Matt Reeves actually. Love Robert Pattinson, love Zoe Kravitz, love the cast. So I was like, everything here on paper, I'm like, yeah, I'm going to enjoy it. I was just surprised, honestly, by how much I enjoyed it because of how all of those elements were working together in this. So I still left it feeling like, I'm not going to put the word masterpiece on it because I feel like you said, there's so much that this character that's already been examined in effective ways before. I just think it's just another good example of these elements being molded in a way that, presented in a particular way that was unique, from a filmmaking standpoint. I think that the great Batman has already been made, so.
Yeah, I think that's well said. Daniel, what do you say to that?
So, yeah, first of all, I'm going to agree. This take both is new, and I think it establishes its existence. It definitely deserves to exist, and we haven't seen a Batman that solves mysteries. Wow, what a fucking thought to have a Batman that does that. But here we have it, and again, it only is taken away from that in the final act. It starts to feel a lot more like going through the motions of a traditional superhero film. With that being said, I still think there is a bit of room to explore this character. And yes, I get that Ben Affleck's, his take on Batman, but more specifically Zack Snyder's interpretation of Batman does draw heavily from The Dark Knight Returns. I do not think it is The Dark Knight Returns. I still think there's room for that story to be told, a very older Batman. I also think you can get around, or not necessarily have to add that, also he happens to kill people. I think you can incorporate that in, but I still think it's a very important argument to be made to whether or not that's appropriate for Batman and to allow him to wrestle with that in a feature-length film. I think there's still meat on those. But I mean, again, look at something like Logan. I think given that film, and what they were able to do with Wolverine, I think, there's definitely something there with Batman. Not that I wanted to imitate or emulate Logan, but I still think there's plenty of room for an older Batman who is, despite at that point being Batman for maybe 20 plus years, uncertain if the Batman experiment is a valid one. At the same time, I don't mean to tread on this path. A lot of people always mention how much they want to see like a Batman Beyond film.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth, because you said you were talking about Dark Knight Returns, and I would be way more compelled by a Batman Beyond.
I don't necessarily give a
Just say it, Daniel. Just say it.
My bad. I don't necessarily give a shit about Batman in the future. What I care about is Bruce Wayne's body unable to be the Batman and him having to assume the mentor role. I think that's the more important, narrative takeaway from that. So, it can take place in the future, whatever. Batman 2049, sure. But I think that's somewhere is the idea that, again, Bruce Wayne cannot he simply is incapable of being the Batman anymore. And now, I have to teach somebody else, because while we get that idea with at the end, the conclusion of Nolan's trilogy, that presumably Robin is going to become the new Batman or Nightwing or whatever he's going to be, it's still it doesn't force Bruce Wayne to be like, oh wait, I can't, because that's the thing about Batman. Yes, he is a symbol that can in some ways, and I think Nolan's trilogy gets on this, that he's a symbol that can be transferred, or a moniker that can be transferred to somebody else. Yes, I don't like the idea that Bruce Wayne can just be like, yep, not my problem anymore, bye, I'm going to go retire to Europe or Italy or wherever he's at the end of the film. I like the idea that he is responsible for the Batman. So now he has to make sure that it lives on beyond himself, if it truly is some immortal symbol. And I think something like Batman Beyond, or an adaptation to that effect, it could definitely get into some interesting territory. So no, I would say, while it might be very hard to do something new with Batman, it's very possible. And I'm excited to see what happens next.
Something new with Batman, because you said him taking on like a mentor role or getting older. Mm-hmm. One thing I'd been talking about with like a few people is, it seems like all of these are like 3 films done. They make a ton of money. The studio's like, we can't let this go. Let's redo it.
Yeah.
So if Pattinson's on for 3, let's say, why can't they just write a blank check and say, be our Harrison Ford and let's make this an Indiana Jones thing. Let's grow up with you and see where this goes. Like, I'm tired of getting new Batman every 6 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it would be really cool, because you have 2 individuals who are very talented in Matt Reeves and then Robert Pattinson, who people are really gravitating towards. So like a fresh take on this would be, lock him up. Don't do the 3 films and then get somebody new in 4 more years because you guys want a cash grab and you guys know that it's going to make money. Like, push this through and like do something cool with it that's never been done before. And let's make like an actual anthology of films like they did for Indiana Jones, like as he like grew up. I don't know. I know that's a super big stretch, but that could be something new and something that you're kind of speaking up to the mentor.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question, because whether or not it's realistic, at this point it doesn't matter.
Probably
because I think
not,
but it begs an interesting question, because I'm saying like, it's in that Bruce Wayne cannot conveniently let go of the Batman. It almost seems like we as a society have trouble letting go of the Batman or allowing him to be something else or allowing it to shift into what it could be.
So I have got a few different things to say. I'll try to keep it really short though.
I was just thinking, in 7 years when Jacob Tremblay is the new Batman, I'm going to guess. So sorry, go ahead.
Something I have not said on this podcast at all, and Brock, this is going to seem counter to what you're saying, but just hang tight with me.
That's fine. I disagreed with you. You can disagree with me.
I actually think DC should give up on the long-term universe.
Oh, yeah.
Just give up. You messed it up. Honestly, I'm not going to speak ill of the MCU. I think what they did was unprecedented, incredible, and obviously wildly financially successful. I'm always there at the earliest screening imaginable to see every movie I want to see. Doctor Strange, Multiverse of Madness, you better believe your ass I'm going to be at the Thursday night screen to watch a new Sam Raimi movie. So I want to be clear. But what I also am saying is that I'm very fatigued with that universe, one, and they're having to get increasingly creative to really keep me engaged in the way that I used to be. One, and two, just the continuity baggage that now comes along with any time you want to introduce something new, like is really stacking up. Like, I mean, and it's not even just with individual characters. It's our movies all have to look they're in the same universe. There's a certain brand standard we have to apply across the MCU.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that is a bad approach. I want to make this very explicitly clear. Obviously it has worked. We wouldn't have gotten Avengers Endgame, which I think was a blockbuster spectacle like that only comes around once or twice in a lifetime. So I'm just throwing that out there. What I am saying though is DC missed the boat.
Yeah.
It's over. I feel like the weaknesses of the MCU are starting to show a lot more than the strengths. And for DC to attempt to do that sort of thing just seems like that ship has sailed, which is why I found this take, while familiar, to be a breath of fresh air in comparison to all of the other superhero movies we have. So I just want to throw that out there. I really think DC should just double down on making really good standalone movies. All that said, I still think the idea of bringing a Michael Keaton, or maybe in 10 years, a Christian Bale, into a Batman Beyond, using the audience's knowledge of the performers and the character and a crossover is cool. I just don't think it needs to be marred with like a huge interconnected universe where people try to like if Michael Keaton just showed up in Batman Beyond, I honestly could care less how it connected to the original film of 1989. I just think it's really cool that you have an iconic actor like Michael Keaton, who represented that for an entire generation, the 80s and 90s, who's coming back to play like a mentor figure. It's a really long way of saying I really want DC to just double down on standalone. And if the opportunity comes along where they can mix and match, cool. But like I wouldn't get so focused on that, because I think at this point it's going to be a better movie if they don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I was talking about earlier about the runtime, the 10 odd minutes that I exclude from it justifying its length is basically the scene where it tries to establish that like, oh, this is going to be a part of a larger canon. Don't worry, the Joker's here to, and maybe the Riddler will return too. That just feels like a weakness of the film. And like, you don't need that to establish a sequel. The sequel will happen inevitably, whether or not you have that. So why even bother just shoehorning that into your film?
Sorry, go, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Just piggybacking off that, one thing I found fresh was them pulling in the Falcones and the Moonies, which is kind of more off of like the Gotham TV show and probably, from the comics and stuff, which wasn't really any other things. Like that was, although they went too far into it and kind of dwelled on it and kind of did weird things with it, I enjoyed that they brought that into the fold.
They made it meaningful, because watching The Dark Knight very recently is like the only time the Falcones are mentioned, and is like kind of at the start of the film where like
it's the all the mob wars happen off screen. So the Falcones are the ones who rule the town in Batman Begins, but then there's a power vacuum that gets created when Falcone's taken out, which is when the Joker shows up and causes great chaos. And actually, there's a straight to animated home video Gotham Knight, I think is what it's called, or Gotham Knights, one of the two, that came out. It was an anime anthology series that details all the mob wars that happen in between Batman Begins and Dark Knight. This is a tangent, but I just want to throw that out there because it's actually really cool.
Hey, we're dropping knowledge for people who are listening.
But no, okay. So Daniel, I think you bring that up. That's actually a great segue to our final topic, and I think we should keep this one relatively short. But what's to come? Because there are two things that happen in the final act that I referenced earlier that you're alluding to here, that I just feel like whiff of a studio executive saying, all right, we got to have a big set piece and we got to tease the next movie with none other than our other $1 billion character, the Joker, and it's Barry Keoghan, who I really like. He's an inspired casting choice.
Yeah.
But you know what would have been cooler is if they just put him in the next movie, or they built a movie around him and he showed up.
Showed up instead of
and even knowing they did tease it a little bit with the card, but we didn't have to worry about this hugely inserted scene where it's like, they're gonna laugh at you and da da da.
Yeah.
It just it brings the movie to a halt and says, yeah, we know a sequel's coming.
Right.
And also, this is my take. I don't really want another Joker for a while, guys.
Yeah.
And not that I don't love him, but Heath Ledger was iconic. Joaquin Phoenix did something experimental that he was terrific, and I'm sure we're going to get follow-ups to that movie at some point. But Batman has the best rogues gallery of any superhero. We got, come on, give me a Mr. Freeze movie. This movie, the Riddler, and Incredible. There's just so many possibilities, and you keep going back to the same guy that's already also been, Laron, to your point, mined heavily.
To some degree, yeah.
Well, that's the thing is if you know the Batman, you know who the fucking Joker is. So you don't need to allude to him in the film that he's not any kind of focus to. Like he will naturally be socketed.
It felt very pigeonholed.
Exactly. Yeah. You can fit I promise you'll be able to fit the Joker into a Batman story. He'll come up. Like you don't.
It almost felt like Matt Reeves was taken out at that point, and they told him, "Hey, Matt, why don't we do something with the Joker?"
Have you thought about a sequel?
Yeah, maybe you should do this. And he's like, fuck, I guess.
Well, Caleb was saying earlier, executive oversight. That is what that whole final act just feels like to me.
Yeah.
It's just
yeah. I mean, I don't know how to say it any more eloquently, but it really just feels like an executive watched an early cut of the movie and they're like,
we need to see, and that's what it feels. That's what I'm saying. It feels divorced from the world we've already seen.
Yep.
Even knowing that. I mean, this universe could exist with another Joker. I agree with you. I prefer to see other villains, but yeah, that sequence just feels almost like an afterthought. And given the placement of it at the end, it does just feel just pandering to that space.
It also weirdly makes the Riddler seem weak-minded, which is weird because that's literally the antithesis of the character, that he's able to just laugh with this Joker who talks him into thinking he's, I don't know. It's a weird scene.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's remove the Joker teaser that I think it sounds like we all agree that we really don't like.
Yeah.
What do you guys want to see in the next one? Brock, I'll start with you.
Okay. So the only way to make the Joker teaser palatable is to do a full-on Arkham Asylum movie where we don't have the Joker out and about and setting up this world. We have a lot of known villains already in the asylum. Something happens like Prison Break or something happens because the games were popular. We've never had an Arkham Asylum movie, and I know that that's probably a lot of really on the nose and what people want to see. So I feel like it could be a cool trajectory. I think bringing in a new villain, like main villain, Hugo Strange. So there was things with him, like with Arkham Asylum and how he did experiments there with prisoners and kind of turn them into monsters. So I think that would be a cool, to make it just almost go the Sam Raimi route that he went with, the Multiverse of Madness, and just go full on, all these villains in one central location. Batman somehow has to go in, save somebody, save Gotham from these people rising up. Maybe the Joker and Hugo are the main people kind of pulling the strings. I don't know. I just like bringing in a new villain. And also, it's already been alluded to, and it's maybe going to happen, the Court of Owls, which is, Gotham elite people kind of pulling strings. But I think we can also bring in Hugo Strange in that as a new villain that almost kind of fighting against them, almost the same way with the Riddler that Batman would be. So he feels, I don't know, there could be that weird parallel between the two, but not so much as in this one. But I know that he kind of was against like Gotham Elite, Hugo Strange. So like bringing in the Court of Owls, you can like bring in like another like kind of multi-villains in that.
And it's important to note that Hugo Strange, without getting into the details, but what he's iconically known for is knowing Batman's identity.
Yes.
That is like his thing is he's a guy who's
mind reader.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
He had the machine that was a mind reader.
And firstly, I just reiterate, the games are very good. The story and the writing in them is very, very good. You should go play Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. But yeah, I actually think that would be good because you know what we haven't actually seen? Batman do shit in Arkham. So, you know,
Exactly.
which is an iconic location from the comics. So actually that, you know, Brock, that's a really good point. Laron, what do you want to see in a sequel?
I want to see more of the first third of the Batman, assuming Matt Reeves is signed on for, you know, the next films. Less Nolan and none of Schneider. So
Get that Snyderverse out of here.
just get that Schneiderverse out of here. Exactly. I would love to see another detective story. You know, just shift the focus onto a different aspect because I really love that a lot, quite a bit. So I could go along with that terrain because I think that's what invested me more in this one. And I think that when I think about it, like going into it, I went into this movie again with a little bit of apprehension, kind of a little fatigue. Like, do we really need this? But all the pieces are on the paper that I have to go and see it. And then again, like I said, I left it. Most surprising aspect I did when I left the film was that I wanted to see more, and I was surprised that was something that I would say going into this one, saying, "Did we even need this?" You know. So I think that's the biggest takeaway I think from it is that there was enough that was working here that made a case for more stories to be told in the event that they stick to a certain, you know, aspect of it and don't, you know what I mean? Like not stick the landing in the end and stoop to, you know, again, the overproduced, you know, oversight where we have to make a movie that fits the mold of what you've seen before. Because so much about this, the thrilling aspect of it was that they were doing something different and then they decided, but we got to end it in a way that, you know, that appeals to our oversights, you know, so.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think an executive, so what you're saying is you don't want an executive who says, yeah, Black Widow movie. I want more of that in my Batman
Right.
All right. Daniel Bokemper, what would you like to see in the next Batman movie?
Yeah, I wasn't even thinking about it, but Brock's notion of actually focusing on Arkham as an institution, I think is very important. And I think is actually a way to, yes, I do want to see new villains, but at the same time, if you need to incorporate some classics, I think putting them in the Arkham frame, it changes the game quite a bit. At the same time, I will also recommend, late stage recommendation, A Serious House on Serious Earth, a very short graphic novel, but one of the craziest interpretations of Arkham Asylum I've ever seen. And as far as the art direction in that graphic novel, it's great and maybe something that could be emulated in a potential Arkham film. I do think that while Robin / Nightwing, but mostly Robin has appeared.
Robin first, then Nightwing.
Then Nightwing, yeah. Has appeared in films before. I think there might be the potential to actually create a better Robin origin story, perhaps through the vehicle of this Batman we have now. And I think one that's actually kind of like properly developed and maybe again begs some questions about vigilantism that we haven't seen with these Batman films. So I think maybe a deeper exploration of Robin. I also do love Under the Red Hood as an animated film. I don't know if that's something that can actually be explored within this particular potential Batman franchise, but maybe picking up on notes from it might help. I just envision this idea of a Robin who starts like following Batman, but doesn't really get the danger, almost a la like Nightcrawler or something, which is a film this actually made me want to revisit. I don't know. I think there's something that's there to be had with Batman's sidekick, in addition to some of the things I mentioned earlier about the grizzled veteran Batman who's forced to train the next generation. But yeah, there's definitely some directions this can take, and I'm excited. I'll be there for it at this point.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, I won't belabor the point. But I will say the one area that I think the movies have not really explored in any meaningful way is the Bat family aspect. They have attempted to with the Schumacher films and done such a poor job at it that basically every version of Batman that's come after has said, let's avoid that because it's too hard or too difficult or less interesting. So, Daniel, just to say to your point, whether it's Batman Beyond or whether it's the Bat family, meaning Batman coaching up Robin, Nightwing, or Batgirl, I do think that is something we haven't seen.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want that in the sequel, though. I'm just going to stick to my Mr. Freeze. I think Mr. Freeze is a character that deserves justice. I enjoy what Arnold Schwarzenegger did with it. It's silly, it's ridiculous, it's funny, but like that character is one the version that was actually forged out of the animated series. A character existed before. The animated series came in and redid his entire backstory to be this really tragic, melancholy character who ultra rich businessman murdered his wife in cold blood and this guy seeked vengeance. Seems like it might fit with kind of the themes of this movie. So, you know, just a thought. And I think the Gotham they have established way more than Nolan's lends itself to that sort of character being believable in this world that he's built already.
Can you imagine like a melancholic, like Rami Malek or something like someone like that portraying Mr. Freeze? Like
Rami Malek?
I think it would work. I don't want to see a muscle. Like what? Okay, first of all, Arnold Schwarzenegger? Like what?
No, but Rami Malek, I mean, he was okay. Well, you know what, Dale, we're going to have to talk about more about this. Who would be a good Mr. Freeze? That's a good question.
He would. Okay. Well,
I like Rami Malek.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just because the last thing I saw him was No Time to Die, and he was not the best Bond villain. But you know, okay, guys, we have talked for so long about the Batman. Not quite the length of the film, but getting pretty close. So I'm just going to give everyone a chance to weigh in if they have anything to say. Does anyone have anything else they would like to add? Get off their chest. Now is the time. Anything else you'd like to say about the Batman before we wrap up today's show?
I would say go see it, but it made $130 million at the box office. Yeah. So I mean, I think everyone did.
And it's going to be on HBO Max in 45
days in April.
Yeah, so
not to discourage, go see it on the big screen because it is a very big screen movie.
Yeah.
But also, I'm kind of pretty pumped that I'll be able to watch it at home.
That's when I'm going to be rewatching it.
Yeah, same.
I would say look at the cards that the Riddler sends. In each, there's 5 different versions, and each one is a possible clue to future villains.
Ooh, that's fun.
I can run through it if you want me to.
Do you have them already?
I do. This is not me. This is something I found today while trying to prepare notes, but I found it super interesting, so I went ahead and wrote it down just in case everybody wants to hear it.
Do it.
First card, Owls, of course, Court of Owls. Second card, Mad Scientist, Hugo Strange. Third card, Woman in Green, Poison Ivy.
Yeah.
Fourth card, looks like it's all black with just eyes. Looks like a Cheshire Cat, which could be the Mad Hatter. And then the 5th card is a puppet, which would then be the ventriloquist
Calendar Man.
Scarface. And then the 6th card,
it's a calendar.
in scene, it's a calendar.
Yes.
So
boy.
I came upon that and thought that was very interesting. That every card basically had a connection to
Completely
a
missed
villain.
that.
That's
did.
really
Wow.
that's compelling. Also, I'm just going to stop and say the ventriloquist is a very fucked up villain, and he would be pretty terrifying if they chose to do that character.
Yeah, this is the universe to deliver that.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Have you guys gone to Rat Alalata or Alada yet?
No.
Rataalada.com. It's an actual website.
It's a real website.
It's a real thing.
It's a real thing. And if you go through it, there is Riddler code at the end. Marcus, shout out Marcus Eakers, who me and Bokemper work with, told me about it today. And we got to the end screen and it had the Riddler codes. And so I was like, I have no clue how to decipher this shit because I am not Alfred. So I just Googled, hey, what's this shit deciphered? And somebody had already done it. And when translated using the key, the message reads, you think I'm finished, but perhaps you don't know the full truth. Every ending is a new beginning. Something is coming.
Okay.
So Matt Reeves is basically professing that we're getting a sequel.
So
Yes.
that's all I had. I thought those were 2 pretty cool things that I saw today.
Way to stick the landing.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
I have no credit.
That's
I
a
just
great way to
copied
put it
it
out there.
offline. So
Brock, I appreciate you sharing with me because it makes me more hyped for the sequel.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you are still listening, thank you so much for tuning into this very lengthy discussion. Thank you for tuning in this very lengthy discussion of the Batman. It's been a real pleasure speaking with each of you guys. It's always fun talking movies with you. So we'll go around the table and give you a chance to weigh in on where people can keep up with you and your work online if they want to get more of your movie opinions on all the things coming out. So actually, we'll go around the table directly to my left. Brock Lay, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Brockness_monster.
All right, check it out, especially on Instagram. Brock's got some cool stuff. Laron Chapman, where can people follow you online?
You can follow my name at Laron Chapman on Facebook. You can follow me on Letterboxd at Cinna_man, or you can follow me on Instagram at Black Movie Magic OKC.
Awesome. And Daniel Bokemper, bring us home here. Where can people follow you and your work online?
You can find me in the shadows, where you least expect me.
No, you can find me at Twitter at Daniel_Bokemper. Just spell it the best you can. You'll get there. And then at World Literature Today, periodically reviewing books, but also, of course, the Cinematropolis, where I recently wrote an essay on what did I write that essay on? Oh, yeah, that's right. Charlie Kaufman films, 3 films he at least wrote, 2 of which he directed. Just in time for Valentine's Day, everyone's favorite holiday invented by greeting card companies to make people feel bad. And also keep an eye out for a Batman essay about the identity crisis that is the Batman soon. Perhaps as soon as you hear this
episode, you should go to the cinematropolis.com right now and read the essay.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you, Kit. Weird how that works.
It's synergy. I appreciate you, Daniel Bokemper, and everything you do for the Cinematropolis. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. It is a honor.
And of course, you can follow me tweeting about all the things, mostly movies, sometimes video games and TV at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. And you can follow everything we do at the Cinematropolis at thecinematropolis.com or by following us on social media and Facebook at facebook.com/the Cinematropolis or on Twitter at the Cinematrop. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Keep your eyes peeled later this month when Laron and I make our annual Oscar predictions. That's right, the big show, the Super Bowl for movie fans, coming at you here in a couple weeks. And Laron and I think, Laron, this might be the 4th or 5th year we're bringing Oscar predictions to the listeners. So
I'm well equipped for this conversation.
I am ready. And you know what? I'm pretty pumped. It's not every year that I get pumped about Oscars predictions, but I'm pretty pumped this year. I think it'll be good. I think it's gonna be a good show.
Yeah.
Until then, listeners, we'll catch you again next time.